On the morning of May 17, 2005, a 911 call came from a quiet home in Alexandria, Kentucky. A woman was screaming, claiming that someone had broken in and shot her husband. When the police arrived, they found the house in chaos. Drawers were pulled open, items were scattered everywhere, and broken glass covered the floor. In the bedroom, they discovered a man's body. Initially, it appeared to be a botched robbery, but something felt off about the situation. The children provided different accounts of the event, raising suspicion. Then, the police uncovered a crucial piece of evidence hidden deep inside the washing machine that changed the investigation. What truly happened in the Bosley home that morning? Robert Bob Bosley was born on August 6, 1962, in the small town of Alexandria, Kentucky. He grew up in a close-knit, religious family with his siblings. From an early age, Bob demonstrated a sharp intellect and a strong ambition. Although much of his early life is not well documented, it is clear that he started planning his future before he even became an adult. Bob dreamed of becoming wealthy and owning his own business. He began by offering chimney cleaning and minor roof repairs. With long hours, affordable rates, and a strong work ethic, he gained a reputation as a reliable and friendly worker. His hard work paid off. Eventually, Bob expanded his one-man operation into a successful business, Bosley Roofing and Chimney Sweep in Alexandria. Under his management, the company became known for its quality and reliability, attracting loyal customers and generating impressive profits. With a growing influx of money, Bob aimed for even greater success. He started buying rental properties, eventually owned about 20. These investments significantly increased his income, making him one of the most successful businessmen in the area. His newfound wealth allowed him to enjoy a lavish lifestyle, complete with sports cars, horses, an airplane, a large boat, and a collection of expensive firearms. His boat, frequently spotted on Lake Cumberland, became known for hosting wild adult parties filled with alcohol, music, and scantily dressed attendees. Bob met 18-year-old Amy at one of his favorite local restaurants. Amy, also from Alexandria, grew up in a working-class family and faced financial challenges, especially due to her father's struggles with alcohol. Despite these difficulties, she was determined to create a better life for herself. After graduating high school with top honors in 1986, Amy enrolled in business studies at a community college affiliated with Northern Kentucky University. To support her education, she worked as a waitress, where she met Bob. He was older, wealthy, and charming. Initially shy, Amy soon became captivated by his lifestyle. She began attending his infamous lake parties and quickly became a close friend of his. Eventually, Amy won Bob's heart. After 4 years of dating, they got married. This was a major change for Amy, who had transformed from her modest beginnings to marrying one of the most eligible bachelors in the area. They then started a family, welcoming their daughter Morgan in 1996 and their son Trevor 3 years later. Amy transitioned from her carefree party days to fully embrace her new role as a dedicated mother, swapping late nights at the lake for school events and parenting responsibilities. Bob was expanding his business and investments, but he found one aspect particularly frustrating: administration. Managing payroll, taxes, invoices, and contractors felt burdensome to him. He preferred spending time by the lake rather than being stuck in an office. On weekends, he often disappeared on his boat for days at a time, keeping his location a secret. Friends later noted that Bob seemed to be distancing himself from his family, becoming more involved in a life of indulgence, secrecy. Since Amy had a background in business administration, he asked her to take over the company's financial and administrative tasks. Initially, she was hesitant, but she eventually agreed. From that point on, Amy took charge of managing the company's finances, payroll, and tax responsibilities. The Bosleys seemed to be doing exceptionally well, living in a charming log cabin in the woods south of Alexandria while their dream home was being built close by. This future home was impressive, featuring 14 acres, stained glass windows, a stone tower, and Gothic gargoyles. To everyone else, the Bosleys represented the American dream. They were good-looking, successful, generous with their time, actively involved in their church and their children's school. Bob was known for donating services to low-income families, earning respect throughout the community. However, beneath this fairy tale facade lay a troubling reality. As the administrator, Amy had access to the company's complete financial situation. While Bob focused on expanding the business, the lake, and building their dream home, Amy secretly started redirecting company funds. Instead of paying taxes, she funneled the money into a personal account that was hidden from view. For years, this embezzlement went unnoticed, but the IRS eventually caught on. They sent multiple letters, made phone calls, and tried to schedule meetings, but Bob never received any of these communications. Amy had ensured that all IRS correspondence was sent to a private mailbox she controlled, fully aware that the government was closing in but thinking she could delay things indefinitely. On the morning of Tuesday, May 17, 2005, just days before their 15th wedding anniversary, everything changed. Around 5 a.m., Amy Bosley made a frantic 911 call. Her panicked voice filled the line until the call was abruptly interrupted by a loud crash. The dispatchers attempted to reconnect. Shortly after, law enforcement rushed to the Bosley cabin. When they arrived, they found Amy in shock, holding her children. Her sister soon arrived to take care of the kids while Amy was taken in for questioning. Police secured the area and contacted the crime scene unit. As daylight broke, more officers arrived to search the nearby forest with K-9 units and a helicopter, looking for what they suspected was a fleeing intruder. In the bedroom, they found Bob's lifeless body. He was kneeling beside the bed, leaning forward, and had multiple gunshot wounds. However, only 2 shell casings were found in the room, which added to the confusion. As detectives examined the evidence, they started to doubt the authenticity of the crime scene and the entire narrative surrounding it. Except for the children's rooms, the rest of the house was chaotic. Kitchen cabinets were left wide open, including those under the sink, which seemed odd for a thief to rummage through. A rear door had a broken window, indicating a potential entry point, but surprisingly, most of the broken glass was outside rather than inside. This inconsistency raised suspicions from the beginning. The disorder continued elsewhere in the house. In the bathroom, the mirrored cabinet was open, and prescription bottles were strewn across the floor. It appeared more like a staged mess than the result of a rushed intruder. According to Amy's 911 call, the alleged attacker had left quickly, so why was there such a mess? As crime scene investigators examined the house, detectives began interviewing Amy Bosley at the police station. She seemed shaken and at times distressed, but appeared confused, as if she was having trouble remembering the details of her story. Amy described the intruder as a white male with a nasal voice, bad breath, and a strong odor of urine. She claimed he burst in during the night. He attacked both her and Bob. She had 2 marks on her chest, which she said were from the assault. When detectives asked who might have wanted to harm Bob, Amy indicated that he wasn't very popular, suggesting he had a wild reputation that could have led to enemies among disgruntled employees. She specifically mentioned a contractor and longtime friend of Bob, as someone with whom Bob had recently had a disagreement. However, the friend was quickly ruled out as a suspect. He had a solid alibi and was very upset about Bob's death. Panic spread throughout the Alexandria community as schools were closed for several days due to the fear of a killer at large. Residents struggled to accept that Bob, a kind and generous man known for his willingness to help others, had been brutally murdered in his own home. Meanwhile, detectives at the cabin searched for clues. They found only 2 shell casings near Bob's body, despite multiple gunshot wounds, prompting them to look in the basement. There, in the family's washing machine, they discovered wet clothing and, at the bottom, a folded cloth with 4 additional shell casings. It was puzzling. Why would a fleeing killer hide evidence in a washing machine inside the victim's home? Even more unusual was an aluminum baseball bat found nearby, showing fresh scratches and white residue. Further lab analysis would be necessary to understand its potential relevance. Amy has been released and can now reunite with her children, but new details are emerging. The crime scene looks suspiciously arranged. Valuables, including large amounts of cash, were left alone. Amy's emotional reaction seems insincere. She showed no tears or genuine sorrow. Investigators believe there may be hidden motives. Then, a significant development occurred. IRS staff visited the station after learning about Bob's death. They had been trying to reach him for months regarding an enormous unpaid tax bill of over $1.7 million. A meeting was set for the day Bob died. The IRS agents also revealed an odd detail. During a previous call, they had spoken to someone who claimed to be Bob, but the voice sounded strange, high-pitched and unnatural. They suspected it was a woman pretending to be a man, and that voice may have belonged to Amy. The motive is now clear. Amy, who was responsible for managing the company's finances, had embezzled millions of dollars by redirecting tax payments into her personal account. Bob, completely unaware of her actions, he will learn the truth as soon as the IRS is ready to confront him. To make matters worse, there were allegations of Bob's infidelities. His sister later told investigators that she overheard Amy say she would shoot Bob if he ever cheated on her or left her. At the time, it seemed like a joke, but it now felt like a serious threat. Despite the growing evidence against her, Amy Bosley continues to deny any involvement in her husband's murder. During her second interrogation, she insists that she loved Bob, even though their marriage had its issues. She acknowledges that they faced problems, as many couples do, but argues there was no reason for her to harm the father of her children. Investigators, however, have a different perspective. Ballistics tests confirm that all 6 bullets that hit Bob correspond to 6 casings found, 2 in the bedroom and 4 concealed in the washing machine. A crucial development in the investigation occurred when Morgan and Trevor Bosley, ages 9 and 6, were interviewed separately. Both children provided the same description of the events. They had gone to bed peacefully but were suddenly awakened by the sound of 6 gunshots, followed by the sound of glass breaking. In contrast, Amy reported that the glass broke first and then the shots rang out, indicating inconsistencies in her story. Additionally, the scratches on her chest, which she claimed were from a struggle with the intruder, raised suspicions. The marks were too symmetrical, resembling staged wounds rather than genuine defensive injuries. A closer look at her blouse revealed that it hadn't been torn during the supposed attack. Instead, it had been carefully cut with scissors and then ripped to make it look damaged. Less than 2 weeks after Bob was murdered, authorities arrested Amy Bosley and charged her with the crime. However, there was one critical piece of evidence still missing: the murder weapon. Eventually, the weapon was found, but the circumstances of its discovery are unclear. One account states that a pistol from Bob's gun collection was discovered hidden in Amy's handbag, behind a wardrobe. Another version suggests that the weapon was found later by Amy's sister, who had taken care of Amy's children and belongings that night. While going through Amy's purse, she allegedly found the gun and promptly informed a lawyer, who then turned it over to the police. Regardless of how it was obtained, ballistic testing confirmed that the gun matched the 6 shell casings found at the crime scene and in the laundry. Although the bullets recovered from Bob's body were too damaged to establish a direct match, the circumstantial evidence against Amy was substantial. As the trial opened, prosecutors presented a straightforward and damaging story. For years, Amy had secretly embezzled money from Bob's company by diverting tax payments to herself. She had managed to evade the IRS through mail redirection and deceit, but her luck had finally run out. On May 17, 2005, Bob was set to meet with IRS agents who were insisting on explanations. Amy understood what this meeting signified: being exposed, facing divorce, and possible prison time. In response, the once respected wife, mother, and community volunteer came up with a desperate plan. The night before her meeting with the IRS, Amy, with her children asleep nearby, quietly took one of Bob's guns. Some sources claim she sedated the children first. While Bob was asleep, she shot him. Although wounded, he woke up and tried to defend himself. Investigators noted the way he was injured suggested he lunged at her, unaware that she was the one holding the gun. In shock and bleeding, Bob was unable to overpower her. She attacked him again. By the end of the incident, Bob Bosley, who had built his wealth from nothing, and who had put his trust in Amy, was dead in the home they were planning to share. Amy, who once supported him, now faced charges for orchestrating his murder, not out of fear, but out of greed. Bob Bosley's carefully built life of luxury and respect crumbled in one night due to cold calculations. What was left was a broken family, a shocked community, and an unforgettable legacy of betrayal. She smashed the back glass door with a baseball bat, rifled through cabinets and drawers to create the illusion of a burglary. Next, she concealed 4 spent bullet casings wrapped in cloth at the bottom of the washing machine. To make her injuries look real, Amy lightly cut her chest with what appeared to be scissors and slashed her blouse to suggest a struggle. Finally, she concluded her act with a 911 call, her voice filled with panic and the scene meticulously staged. Forensic evidence presented a different perspective on the case. Laboratory tests showed that glass fragments found on the aluminum bat matched the pieces from the broken rear door. The bat, which Amy's children recognized as belonging to their family, had not been used by an intruder. Instead, it was used by Amy herself. The police found no footprints, vehicle tracks, or any signs of anyone fitting the description Amy gave. No one had entered or left the house that night. Investigators also uncovered details about the Bosleys' marriage. Amy believed Bob had cheated on her. Photos discovered in their safe, taken during wild parties at Lake Cumberland, revealed a secret lifestyle and confirmed at least one affair. While the emotional pain of betrayal was evident, the real motive ran much deeper. Amy had embezzled the large amount of money from Bob's company by skimming off funds and failing to pay taxes. She thought that by killing him, she could keep her secret safe. Without Bob, his assets could cover the debt, allowing her to keep the remaining funds. The defense argued that the bullet casings could have come from Bob's pockets after a trip to the shooting range, but the evidence against Amy continued to mount. Despite this, her lawyer pointed out that there were no eyewitnesses, no DNA evidence, and no clear connection between the bullet casings and the bullets found in Bob's body. This ambiguity provided a chance to influence the jury's decision. Fearing that Amy might be acquitted and wanting to protect the Bosley children from the trauma of testifying against their mother, the prosecutors offered a plea deal. This would allow Amy to avoid a trial, spare her children the emotional strain, and receive a lighter sentence. In return, she would admit her guilt without revealing what had happened to the stolen millions. On November 2, 2006, Amy Bosley appeared in a Campbell County courtroom wearing a green and white prison jumpsuit. Her expression was impossible to read. Before the sentencing took place, Bob's family spoke directly to her. His brother accused her of being a liar and a fraud, warning her that although she might gain her freedom one day, she would never escape the memories of her actions. He reminded her that every night, she would see Bob's face and remember the tears of his children who were left without a father. Bob's sister fixed her gaze on Amy and asked the haunting question that troubled them all: did he beg you to stop? The answer would never be known. Next, Bob's mother approached, heartbroken and shaking, as she read a letter expressing her grief for the final goodbye that never happened. Amy remained silent, looking down and wiping away her tears. The judge acknowledged the damage Amy had caused, not just to her husband, but also to her children, her community, and her own future. He sentenced her to 20 years in prison. According to Kentucky law, she would be eligible for parole after serving 85% of her sentence, which equated to 17 years in prison. On May 18, 2022, exactly 17 years after Bob was murdered, Amy Bosley, who was 54 at the time, was released from the Kentucky Correctional Institution for Women. Most news outlets barely covered her release, and her current whereabouts are unknown. Some speculate that she may be trying to find the millions of dollars she had embezzled. Bob is buried at St. Stephen's Cemetery in Campbell County, Kentucky. He is remembered for his kindness, ambition, and dedication to his family, tragically killed by someone he trusted deeply. In retrospect, Amy's choices appear both tragic and irrational. She was not in financial distress, and her husband was not abusive. The IRS may have offered a solution to her financial issues, or if she sought revenge, a divorce could have made her wealthier and free. Instead, she opted for murder. It was a normal Saturday morning in Bethesda, Maryland, when the manager of a Lululemon store showed up to open for the day. However, the moment she walked inside, she knew something was wrong. The store was a mess, clothes were everywhere, mannequins were knocked over, and the floor had blood on it. At first, it seemed like a terrible robbery gone wrong, but as police started asking questions, the story began to change, and what really happened that night was far worse than anyone imagined. Jana Troxell Murray entered the world on November 22, 1980, in Wichita, Kansas. She was the daughter of David and Phyllis Rosaleen Murray. From a young age, Jana stood out for her adventurous spirit. She had a deep love for animals and dancing. The giving back was part of who she was. She spent much of her life volunteering, and her friends and family often described her as someone whose smile could light up any room. Jana also had a passion for travel. Her goal was to set foot on every continent, and she managed to visit all of them. Her hard work earned her a scholarship that took her to Madrid, where she spent 2 years studying at St. Louis University. She later completed her Bachelor of Science degree at George Washington University in Washington, D.C. But Jana didn't stop there. She pushed forward and eventually earned dual master's degrees in communication and business administration from Johns Hopkins University. For her master's thesis, she focused on Lululemon Athletica, a premium yoga and fitness apparel brand. Naturally, she pursued a position with the company after graduating, and her drive and business instincts quickly landed her a role. By 2011, Jana was a team leader at the Lululemon store in Bethesda, Maryland. She was also close to finishing her second master's degree. Outside of work and school, Jana was in a happy relationship with her longtime boyfriend, Fraser Bosley. What she didn't know was that Fraser had begun researching engagement rings. He was preparing to propose. Life was falling into place beautifully for Jana. Her career was thriving, her education was nearly complete, and her relationship was stronger than ever. A bright future was just around the corner, but everything changed on March 11, 2011. Jana's promising journey was suddenly cut short by a tragic and unimaginable event. The next morning, on March 12, Rachel Ertley, the manager of the Lululemon store, arrived at the Bethesda location shortly before 8 a.m. to open up. Bethesda was generally considered a quiet, safe area, but when Rachel reached the entrance, she noticed the door wasn't locked. That was her first sign that something was off. As she stepped inside, it was immediately clear that something terrible had happened. The store was in disarray, mannequins were knocked over, clothes were scattered. Still trying to make sense of the chaos, Rachel suddenly heard faint moaning. Someone was still inside and in pain. Overwhelmed with panic and fear, she ran out of the store and straight to the neighboring Apple store. She explained that something was terribly wrong inside. A man offered to go in with her and check it out. Inside, he walked toward the back of the store, moving past the chaos. The space looked like a disaster zone. As he neared the office area, he stumbled upon something unimaginable. A woman with long blonde hair was lying face down in a pool of blood. Before he could fully process the horror, a soft moan caught his attention. It was coming from the bathroom. Inside, he found another woman, her hands and ankles bound with zip ties, her body bloody but still alive. It was clear she was injured and in pain, but she was breathing. The man rushed back to the front of the store and told Rachel to call 911 immediately. First responders arrived quickly and were faced with a gruesome scene. They began the task of identifying the two women. Tragically, the deceased was 30-year-old Jana Troxell Murray. The survivor, badly hurt but alive, was identified as Britney Norwood, a 28-year-old employee who had transferred from a Lululemon store in Georgetown just 6 weeks earlier. Britney's injuries were extensive. Cuts and bruises covered her legs, arms, chest, face, and torso. Zip ties still restrained her, and both women's pants had been slashed, raising disturbing concerns that the attackers may have abused them. Britney was rushed to the local hospital, visibly shaken and in need of immediate care. Back at the store, investigators began examining Jana's body. The violence inflicted on her defied belief. Medical examiners would later find 331 wounds on her body, over half of which were concentrated on her chest and face. She had been attacked with at least 6 different tools found scattered throughout the store, most of them likely taken from a store toolbox. Items included a hammer, a box cutter, a wrench, and a knife. Around her neck was a ligature, though it wasn't tight enough to suggest strangulation. Still, it was an odd and unsettling detail. Jana's body was transported for an autopsy while her devastated parents and boyfriend were notified of her death. The autopsy revealed heartbreaking truths. Jana had fought with everything she had. Her body bore over 100 defensive wounds. Ultimately, the fatal blow struck the back of her neck. There was evidence that she had tried to escape. The blood trail led toward the store's emergency exit, and there was even blood on the door handle, along with a key still in the lock. Jana's key. The attack had lasted for roughly 20 minutes. Detectives urgently needed answers, but they were met with challenges. The Lululemon store had no external security cameras, which meant they had no footage showing who might have entered or exited the store that night. Investigators turned to the Apple Store's security footage across the street and discovered video from the night before that showed two men dressed in dark clothing walking near the store around the time the attack occurred. However, the footage was taken from too far away to make any definitive identification. With no other leads, detectives turned to the only person who might know the truth, Britney Norwood. Though Britney was still clearly traumatized, flinching and recoiling from any physical touch, she eventually shared her account of what had happened. According to Britney, on the evening of March 11, 2011, she and Jana were on the closing shift. Jana had driven to work, while Britney took public transit. After locking up the store, they went their separate ways, but shortly after arriving at the metro station, Britney realized she had left her metro card inside the store. She called another coworker to get Jana's number and then phoned her directly. Despite having nearly reached home, Jana turned back to help Britney. It was just like her to go out of her way for someone else. At around 10:05 p.m., Jana unlocked the store door, with Britney right behind her. But the moment the door opened, two masked men in dark clothing pushed their way inside. One was tall, and the other shorter. Both appeared to be white and in their 20s. She said the shorter man attacked her while the taller one took hold of Jana. They forced the women to the back of the store, threatened them, and told Britney they knew where she lived. She had utility bills in her purse with her address along with her ID. Terrified, Britney believed the men were robbers, hoped they would just take what they wanted and leave. But instead, she claimed the situation spiraled into violence. Both women were physically assaulted and taunted with racial slurs. Britney said they were violated, and during the chaos, she could hear Jana screaming. Eventually, the screaming stopped. Britney said that's when she knew Jana was died. She feared she was next, but then, unexpectedly, the men told her they would spare her life. Why they chose to leave her alive, she didn't know. When Britney was asked why the attackers spared her, her answer was chilling. They said she was fun to take advantage of. After the violent attack, the suspects allegedly restrained Britney and left her in a bathroom of the store, where she was later found. The interview with Britney was cut short so investigators could concentrate on collecting forensic evidence, hoping to find DNA that might identify the attackers. In the meantime, based on Britney's description, authorities set up surveillance outside the Lululemon store. Soon after, they noticed two men in black clothing, who matched her description, and stopped them for questioning. However, this lead quickly fell apart. The men turned out to be waiters from a nearby restaurant, and they walked that route every night after their shifts. The black clothing was part of their work uniform. After reviewing surveillance footage from previous nights, police confirmed that these two men routinely passed by the store at that same time. Both men had strong alibis for the night of the assault and cooperated fully with investigators. They provided their DNA and shoe prints for analysis, which all came back clear. On March 16, 2011, 5 days after the incident, Britney was interviewed again. When asked about the type of car Jana drove, she claimed not to know. The interview ended shortly after. On March 18, Britney met with detectives for a third interview. This time, she confessed that she did know what Jana's car looked like because the attackers had forced her to move it. She explained that the men had made her drive Jana's car away from the store before assaulting her. They threatened her life, claiming they were watching her, and warned that they would kill her if she did not return quickly. While moving the car, She spotted a police officer nearby but did not reach out for help, fearing for her safety. Despite her explanation, police began to doubt Britney's honesty. A significant inconsistency arose from her previous statements that both she and Jana had been assaulted, as evidenced by their pants being slashed. However, after 6 days into the investigation, forensic testing revealed surprising results. No evidence of assault was found. The only DNA collected from the scene belonged to Jana and Britney. There was no trace of any male DNA, and the samples from 2 waiters did not match anything from the crime scene. Investigators focused on an important detail: the footprints. All the prints were found inside the store. If the attackers had come in from outside, there should have been some evidence of their entry or exit, but there was none. This left police with 2 possibilities: either the attackers changed shoes inside the store, which seemed unlikely, or they never entered from the outside at all. Furthermore, the smaller footprints at the scene matched Britney's shoes, while the larger prints were from a size 14 shoe. Initially, this suggested an unidentified male suspect. However, when investigators checked the store's inventory, they discovered that the larger shoes belonged to Lululemon stockroom. They were part of the store's inventory. This raised an important question: if 2 men ambushed Jana and Britney, why would they take the time to change into store-brand shoes during such a violent act? It didn't make sense. Meanwhile, employees at the nearby Apple store shared something unsettling with the police. Around 10:30 p.m. on the night of the attack, they heard a loud argument coming from Lululemon. Several staff members, including a security guard, reported clearly hearing 2 women arguing, with one of them pleading, "Talk to me, please don't do this. What's happening?" Their conversation was accompanied by crashing sounds, which indicated a struggle and something heavy being dragged across the floor, yet no one heard a man's voice at any point. At one moment, someone was heard whispering, "God, please help me." Unfortunately, nobody at the Apple store called the police. They assumed the noise was just a workplace dispute, some internal drama. They had no idea that Jana was fighting for her life just a few feet away. As detectives uncovered more evidence, their suspicions about Britney grew stronger. Investigators delved into her past and discovered a troubling detail: Britney had a hidden history that predated her employment at the Lululemon store. In college, she developed a reputation for stealing. Friends, roommates, and teammates began to notice that their belongings, money, clothes, and makeup, were going missing. This frequent stealing led to gossip, and eventually, her kleptomaniac behavior was officially reported. As a result, Britney lost her scholarship and was expelled from school. By 2007, she moved to Maryland and began working at a hotel, where she quickly achieved a managerial position. However, history repeated itself when co-workers discovered that she was stealing from them, leading to her termination. Despite her troubled background, Britney had aspirations. She wanted to become a personal trainer and hoped to open her own fitness center one day. Her job at Lululemon was intended to be temporary, serving as a stepping stone toward her bigger dreams. She and Jana were co-workers and got along well enough. There was no indication of any personal conflict between them. So what sparked the tragic event? That evening, before the store closed, employees followed their usual protocol, which included a mandatory bag check to prevent theft. Jana was assigned to check Britney's bag and discovered something suspicious: a pair of Lululemon leggings with the tag still attached. Rather than confront Britney directly, Jana reported the finding to their manager, who assured her that she would address the issue the following morning. Later that night, after the store had closed and all employees had gone home, Britney reached out to Jana, claiming she had left her Metro card inside and needed help retrieving it. Jana, being kind and willing to assist, agreed to come back. What followed is thought to have been a confrontation, with Britney potentially pleading with Jana not to report her and trying to avoid being fired again. However, when Jana remained steadfast in her decision, the situation escalated. Investigators believe Britney attacked Jana using tools from the store, such as a wrench, a hammer, and a box cutter. As Jana fought to escape and attempted to reason with Britney, the violence escalated to a horrifying level. After killing Jana, Britney moved her car to a different spot to create an alibi and hide her actions. A witness later saw Britney in the vehicle, and nearly 90 minutes later, she was still there, likely planning her next move. Britney returned to the store, put on size 14 shoes she found there, and staged the scene to appear as if a robbery had gone wrong. She messed up the store, stole cash from the registers, and then inflicted minor injuries on herself before using zip ties to bind her wrists and ankles. She placed herself in the bathroom and waited until morning, when her co-workers discovered the horrifying scene. This was a calculated attempt to shift suspicion away from herself. Tragically, Jayna lost her life over a pair of stolen leggings. On March 18, 2011, exactly 1 week after the incident, Britney Norwood was arrested. Prosecutors faced a challenge. They had to demonstrate that this was not an impulsive act of violence but a premeditated murder. If they succeeded, Britney would receive a life sentence without the possibility of parole. However, her defense team aimed for a lesser charge of second-degree murder, arguing that she had acted out of panic in the moment. The trial began in October 2011. Lead prosecutor John McCarthy portrayed Britney as manipulative and a compulsive liar. He presented strong forensic evidence and pointed out inconsistencies in her account to show that she had planned the attack. Meanwhile, the defense acknowledged that Britney had killed Jayna but contended that it was not premeditated, framing it as a tragic situation where she lost control. The details revealed a chilling truth. Jayna didn't die quickly, she fought fiercely, leaving a trail of blood as she tried to escape. She endured a brutal 20-minute attack and was aware of what was happening for most of that time. This level of violence indicated that the act was premeditated, not impulsive. The jury quickly reached a verdict, finding Britney Norwood guilty of first-degree murder after only an hour of deliberation. On January 27, 2012, Britney was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The judge described the murder as cold-blooded, planned, and ruthless, condemning the calculated actions Britney took after the crime. He also criticized the employees at the Apple store for ignoring Jayna's cries for help, labeling their inaction as callous indifference. In 2015, Britney's final appeal was denied. She remains incarcerated at the Maryland Correctional Institution for Women. The calculated murder by her co-worker Britney Norwood, driven by a desperate attempt to conceal a minor theft, revealed a chilling capacity for deceit and violence. Norwood's life sentence without parole delivered justice, but it could not restore the bright future Jayna had been on the cusp of achieving. Jayna's memory endures as a beacon of light, reminding us to remain vigilant against the darkness that can lurk beneath the surface of everyday interactions. Karen Slattery, born September 18, 1969. She has a younger sister named Debbie. The relationship between the two sisters grew closer. The Slattery family lives in a spacious house with a pool near the beach in the small resort town of Delray Beach, Florida. From an early age, Karen was friendly, healthy, and spirited. In high school, Karen considered starting to work at the educational institution she attended. There was a program that offered courses for aspiring nannies. After completing the training, it became clear that Karen was a natural nanny because she got along well with children. She was even trusted to look after the children of local police officers, making her quite popular and in demand in this field. Around the same time, she discovered a new passion for diving and excelled to the point. At that time, Karen's family lived in one of the safest areas. Not only was it a wealthy community, but outsiders rarely wandered in. However, on Sunday, March 24th, an event unfolded that shattered this ideal life. That day, her mother took 14-year-old Karen off at the Helm family home, where she would care for their two children, ages 3 and 7. The children's parents promised to return around midnight to take Karen home. Around 9 p.m., it was time for the girls to get ready for bed, and by 9:30 p.m., the children were fast asleep. Karen went back to the living room, called a friend to discuss plans for an upcoming trip, and then called a classmate who was also a nanny. After chatting, she mentioned she was going to have a snack and would call back shortly. However, Karen never made that call. She frequently called her mother to provide a sense of security, especially when she was alone in a strange house. The last call to her mom was at 10 p.m., during which she assured her that everything was fine and that she'd be home in a couple of hours. When the children's parents returned home, they immediately noticed that the lights were off throughout the house, even though they typically left lights on when Karen was there. They called for her, but there was no response. They walked down the hallway to the kitchen and found a large pool of blood next to a broken telephone. There was no body, but a bloody trail led from the kitchen toward the bedroom, where light was visible under the door. The husband instructed his wife to run outside and call the police, while he hesitated, debating whether to open the door, fearing that the criminal might still be inside and armed. Ultimately, he chose to wait for the police. When law enforcement entered the bedroom, they discovered the body of Karen next to the bed. She was stripped below the waist, and it appeared she had been abused. Karen had multiple stab wounds, and her face was so mutilated that it was difficult to identify her. She was recognized by her clothing. During the investigation of the crime scene, chewed gum was found in a bedroom, along with a broken window with a cut mesh screen through which the killer likely entered. Outside, footprints were found, as well as a bare footprint in front of the broken window. Inside the house, there were also traces of bare feet, suggesting the criminal removed his shoes before entering. The house were examined with luminol, revealing numerous traces of blood. A large quantity of blood was also discovered in the shower, indicating that the killer had used it after the crime. In the kitchen, where the attack had occurred, the most footprints were found, along with a bloody hammer, which was believed to be the weapon used in the initial blow. However, the knife used to mutilate the victim was never found. At first glance, no valuables appeared to be missing. After examining the crime scene, detectives visited Karen's home to inform her parents of the tragic news. It was well past midnight, and her parents were anxiously waiting for her. They could not call the Helms. They assumed Helms were simply delayed and that their daughter would return later, but it turned out to be much worse. This incident shocked the local community. It had always been one of the quietest and safest places in the area. The main suspects initially became the Helms couple. The police searched for any suspicious clues, particularly since the family had moved out of the house just days after the murder. However, this idea was quickly dismissed. It turned out that the family simply could not feel safe in the house. No signs of a struggle were found on the spouses' bodies, no blood stains were present on their clothes, and their footprints did not match the criminals, leading to their exclusion from the list of suspects. After a more thorough examination of the Helms house, it was confirmed that nothing valuable was missing. The only item that could not be found was a pair of leather gloves. Perhaps the criminal used them to avoid leaving fingerprints. The forensic expert determined that Karen received 18 wounds, inflicted by a knife similar to a penknife, approximately 7-8 centimeters long. Her throat was cut 4 times, leaving Karen unable to speak or call for help. Of the 11 wounds, 7 were fatal. The victim rapidly bled to death. The attack was so swift that Karen did not even have time to react or resist the criminal. No defensive wounds were found on her. According to the forensic expert, when she was dragged into the bedroom, she was already unconscious, and the abuse occurred only afterward. The collected samples were sent to the lab for examination, but given the technology of 1984, this process took many months. Karen's funeral took place on March 29, 1984, and many rallied around the Slattery family during that time. The family was heartbroken. The victim's sister, Debbie, was also present at the funeral. Even 40 years later, she recalled how devastating the experience was for her. During the funeral, Debbie, who was an 11-year-old child at the time, thought her sister was just sleeping when she saw her in the coffin. She reached out and touched Karen's nose, at which point she realized that Karen was, in fact, dead. Her mother yelled at her, and this incident at the funeral only worsened Debbie's trauma. No one knew why it happened. Debbie couldn't even sleep, fearing that she might become the next victim of the criminal. Their family was in danger. Local residents were also worried, demanding that the detectives quickly solve the case and find the perpetrator in order to secure the streets of the city. A family friend created a memorial fund intended to raise awareness and gather information. Various fundraising events were held, including charity concerts and sports tournaments, which managed to accumulate $50,000, a significant sum by 1980 standards. This serious reward aimed to help find witnesses who would come forward with valuable information about the tragedy. People were very scared. The number of other crimes had increased compared to the previous year, which sparked true hysteria. By mid-April, rumors were circulating up and down the coast, even among schoolchildren. At one point, students began to suspect a boy who knew Karen. The day after the murder, everyone noticed that he came to school with scratched hands. Later, he carved the words "trust no one" into his desk, leading to a report to the police. An investigation cleared him of suspicion but provided a new lead, which also turned out to be a dead end. Another possible suspect emerged, Christopher Wilder. He emigrated to the USA from his native Australia in 1971. Throughout the 70s, he was a recurrent suspect in abuse assault cases. Wilder abducted, abused, and killed girls, including models he lured to photo shoots, claiming at least 12 victims. He used various methods to carry out his crimes, including shooting, stabbing, strangulation, and even electric shock as a form of torture. When police finally tracked him down, a shootout occurred, resulting in Christopher being killed. People were quick to spread rumors that Christopher Wilder had also attacked Karen, as he had been in the area at the time of the crime. This even led to attempts to tighten legislation for abuse offenders. However, it was later confirmed that he was accounted for in Oklahoma on the day of the murder. No one mourned Karen's death more than her father, Eugene. He had already lost a father, mother, and now his eldest daughter was gone. The entire family actively participated in public activities and became part of a group called Parents of Murdered Children. Together with volunteers, they distributed more than 500 posters featuring Karen's image, hoping this would help lead the police to the criminal. Thanks to these efforts, some interesting information did emerge. One witness claimed that on the night of the 24th, a suspicious man was seen walking along the street a few blocks from where Karen was murdered. Unfortunately, this lead turned out to be a dead end due to the lack of details. During this time, the sheriff's department acquired a new laser technology that improved their fingerprint collection process. This device sped up the gathering of evidence and unveiled details that were previously overlooked. Investigators utilized it at the murder scene and successfully collected numerous new fingerprints overnight that had gone unnoticed before. They had just started analyzing this new evidence when another crime occurred 10 kilometers away from the previous murder site on May 29, 1984, just 2 months after the attack on Karen. The police were dispatched to a house in the nearby small town of Boca Raton. Upon arrival, officers discovered a petite 38-year-old woman lying in bed, covered in blood, with a pillow obscuring her face and a disfigured head underneath. The victim, Georgiana Wardens, had been struck with a hammer. The hammer was also found nearby, similar to the case of Karen. Georgiana, born on February 3, 1946, was a divorced mother of 2. Georgiana worked hard to support her children. On the day of her death, Georgiana had visited relatives and friends before returning home. She and her children went to bed around 11:30 p.m. Everything seemed normal. The next morning, her eldest daughter, 13-year-old, woke up to the sound of the phone ringing. Normally, Georgiana would answer, but this time there was no response. When the girl went downstairs to answer the call, she decided to check on her mother. When she knocked on the bedroom door without receiving an answer, she entered the room and discovered her mother's lifeless body on the bed, with blood everywhere. Terrified, she called her father. When the father arrived, he contacted the police. Officers found evidence of 2 attempted break-ins at the crime scene. The attacker had tortured, abused Georgiana before showering and leaving, much like the previous case with Karen. A knife was discovered in the room and was sent for examination. Georgiana had suffered 5 stab wounds and multiple blunt force trauma injuries likely caused by the same hammer found at the scene. There were also deep lacerations in her genital area and signs of strangulation on her neck. Forensic experts determined that after receiving her injuries, she likely lived for no more than 5 minutes, and the extreme violence suggested the attacker may have been someone known to her. Investigators checked her ex-husband but quickly cleared him due to a solid alibi. Forensic experts searched the area around the house and found a suspicious package in a vacant lot across the street, containing a pair of bloody sneakers wrapped in a towel that matched items from Georgiana's home. The police requested assistance from neighboring towns that had previously used laser technology to collect fingerprints. In the 1980s, there was no Cody's database, so investigative resources were limited. Detective began analyzing suspicious cases from recent months. He noticed commonalities among the victims, including Karen and Georgiana, who, despite their age difference, shared similar physical traits and both had their faces covered during the attacks. Both crimes occurred with a knife and a hammer being used. On May 22nd, a young man from Boca Raton, who returned home late one evening to his mother's house, noticed a stranger attempting to break in through the window. He chased after him, but the criminal escaped on a high-speed bicycle. However, the young man managed to catch up with him, forcing the criminal to abandon his bicycle and flee. Before climbing into the house, the assailant had removed his shoes, leaving his sneakers behind. On May 28, another crime occurred. A nearby restaurant was robbed, and a 20-year-old waitress was assaulted and held at gunpoint, with the perpetrator escaping with $600. Law enforcement in both cities worked diligently to find leads to stop this series of crimes. Meanwhile, community activists sought changes in legislation to address these violent offenses. The detective discovered a connection between all these events, but his suspicions needed to be confirmed. She was able to provide a fairly detailed description. The detective compared the sketch he had created with a stack of photographs of criminals known for abuse assaults. Finally, this led to a result. She helped create the sketch identified one of the criminals as Dwayne Owen, a man with an extensive criminal history, multiple convictions for robbery and abuse crimes. Thus, authorities had a prime suspect, but unfortunately, he had gone on the run. On May 30th, a patrol officer noticed a suspicious man leaving the city on a bicycle. The patrol officer stopped him and asked for an identification. He was 23-year-old Dwayne Owen, who was wanted. All the officers had received a bulletin with his photo. At the station, he was fingerprinted, and comparisons with the crime scene evidence confirmed that he was indeed a very dangerous criminal. In addition to his long list of outstanding arrest warrants, he was considered a suspect in the Georgiana Wardens and Karen Slattery cases. The detective interrogated him. Their conversation lasted about 20 hours. During this time, Dwayne never asked for a lawyer. He confessed to several burglaries, admitted to leaving his sneakers and bicycle behind during one unsuccessful break-in, but he denied any involvement in the murders of Karen and Georgiana. Curiously, Dwayne appeared to enjoy playing cat and mouse with the detective, even reciting poetry and boasting about his criminal talents, as if seeking praise. The detective then contacted another investigator who had previously worked with Dwayne in 1982, engaging with him daily for several weeks. Ultimately, with the help of another officer, Dwayne admitted that he had killed someone, although he did not provide details. While comparing fingerprints found at the crime scene, they managed to find a match. His print was on the book he had snatched from Georgiana's hands before killing her. Gradually, through various tactics, he extracted information from Dwayne, who ultimately confessed to 2 victims. He described how he selected Georgiana by riding his bike through the neighborhood and peering into the windows of homes until he finally managed to break in. According to him, the crime was not premeditated, as he intended to rob Georgiana, but upon finding her asleep with a book, he decided to take advantage of the situation. After the first blow, she screamed, prompting him to hit her several more times with a hammer to silence her. Dwayne also confessed to abusing her and mentioned that he took a shower before leaving, having already prepared clean clothes, which he left in a vacant lot next to the bicycle. Later, the police found those clothes linked to the murder of Karen, but he did not confess to that crime. All the detective could do was to take casts of the footprints left by the criminal at the Helms house and compare them with Dwayne's own. In any case, this evidence alone was not sufficient to charge him with the second murder. However, the police presented this evidence convincingly, leading Dwayne to believe they had something substantial against him. Dwayne later created a similar story, claiming he was walking down the street, and spotted Karen through a window when she was tying the children's hair. He decided to leave, go to a local bar for a few drinks, then return to attack her. At around 11 p.m., he jumped back into the master bedroom through the window, grabbed a pair of women's gloves he found in the room, and grabbed a hammer from the bedroom closet. He looked out the master bedroom door and saw Karen in the living room watching TV. She eventually spotted him and ran toward the phone. Dwayne lunged at Karen and the phone, started stabbing her. Then he took her into the bedroom, just grabbed her legs and pulled her out, with her head behind her, and just closed the door. He said he just needed to abuse her. Dwayne discarded his pocket knife in the nearby sea. He emphasized that he changed his clothes and hid his bloody clothes in the bushes. He accused the detective of doing a poor job, insisting that if they had thoroughly inspected everything, they would have found the clothes. Additionally, he crafted a solid alibi. When he got home, he changed the clock and woke up his brother to remember the time, then reset the clock. If the police had questioned them, this could have supported his alibi. The police re-examined the area around the Helms home and were able to find bloody clothing and a pair of gloves that had gone missing from the Helms house. Notably, he did not harm the children. They remained peacefully asleep in the adjacent rooms. On June 21, 1984, Dwayne Owen was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder, burglary, and abuse. The Slattery family realized they could seek justice. Everyone wanted the death penalty for Dwayne, but this was just the first step in a long process. Dwayne could appeal repeatedly and continue to live in prison, but the local community felt relieved that a dangerous killer was off the streets. Dwayne was born on February 13, 1961, in Michigan, into a dysfunctional family with addicted parents, with an alcoholic mother who died when he was 11, a father who committed to end one's own life when Dwayne was 13. He himself had been drinking and using banned substances since he was 9. Dwayne cycled through foster families and eventually ran away. By the age of 18, he had experienced significant violence. He joined the army and aspired to become a criminologist, attending a special school in Michigan, but after committing his first serious crime, that dream ended. Instead, he aimed to become a notorious criminal and moved to Florida to live with his brother. Dwayne began a series of crimes involving women, typically breaking into homes, robbing them, and sometimes abusing them. He accumulated numerous victims. His list of crimes continued to grow. In October 1985, his trial commenced, during which the prosecution presented a recording of Dwayne confessing to the murders of Georgiana and Karen. His lawyer claimed the confession was obtained under duress. The jury did not believe him and found him guilty, resulting in 2 death sentences. As expected, Dwayne filed multiple petitions for clemency. A year later, during another trial, Dwayne's brother spoke about his mental issues, and the defense tried to argue insanity but failed. Dwayne continued to appeal his sentence, ultimately reaching the Supreme Court. He convinced a judge that his confessions were obtained under pressure. In the 1990s, a retrial was ordered, and DNA retesting, aided by advancements in technology, showed a much higher probability of matches to Dwayne. The defense continued to argue insanity. To eliminate doubts, a fellow inmate revealed the location of the knife used in Karen's murder, which Dwayne had confessed to him. The police found the knife at the specified location and then had to exhume Karen's body for comparison, which dealt another blow to the Slattery family. By 1999, the prosecution presented new evidence, a point supported by several experts. Dwayne Owen was sentenced to death again. Detectives suspected Dwayne might be involved in other unsolved murders in the area, but he never confessed to them. His defense team continued to appeal, allowing him to live until June 15, 2023. Dwayne was finally executed, almost 40 years after Karen's death. Her mother, Carolyn, and sister, Debbie, witnessed Dwayne's final moments as he was administered a lethal injection. Debbie tried to make eye contact with the man who took her sister's life, but he kept his eyes closed throughout the ordeal. Dwayne Owen was pronounced dead at 6:14 p.m. after a lethal injection at the Florida State Prison, according to the office of Governor Ron DeSantis. One of Florida's longest-serving death row inmates, Owen was 23 at the time of the attack and 62 when he was executed. Debbie struggled with sleep issues for many years, and after the execution, decided to serve in law enforcement, eventually becoming the deputy sheriff of Monroe County. She stated that since she could not sleep peacefully because of people like Dwayne, she wanted to protect those who could. On the evening of May 28, 2023, 29-year-old Julia Tramontano vanished without a trace. 7 months pregnant, she stopped responding to calls and messages from loved ones. The first person to report her disappearance was the man she lived with, Alexander Impagnatiello. He insisted that when he returned home from work, he found the apartment empty and had no idea where his partner could have gone. From the very beginning, there were too many unusual details in this case. Julia had left behind most of her personal belongings, and her plans for the near future gave no indication that she intended to disappear. As investigators began piecing together her last known activities, they uncovered even more troubling facts. The night before she went missing, Julia had sent messages to her mother, Loredana Femiano, and a close friend, revealing that she had had a serious argument with Alexander. She was deeply upset and wrote that the situation was causing her a great deal of distress. But the most important question remained unanswered: what really happened that fateful evening? If Julia had truly left the house on her own, why had no one seen her since? In the days that followed, investigators would begin unraveling a web of deception that would lead to a grim truth. Julia was born on May 2, 1994, in a small town in the province of Naples. She grew up in a close-knit family where support and warmth were always present. Her parents encouraged independence and self-confidence from an early age. While they embraced modern views, family traditions remained a cornerstone of their lives, and home was always a place she could return to for guidance, comfort. Julia attended a local school, excelling in the humanities. She was drawn to real estate, fascinated by architecture, investment opportunities, and the idea of becoming a successful real estate agent. After high school, she pursued a degree in the field, quickly mastering the profession thanks to her analytical mindset and strong communication skills. By the age of 25, she had built a solid reputation in the industry, but for Julia, this wasn't enough. She dreamed of life in a big city filled with opportunities. By the time she turned 26, her career in her hometown had reached a plateau. Working at a real estate agency, she realized the local market had its limitations. Inspired by her friends' stories, she decided to move to Senego, a suburb of Milan, where she believed would offer her a new chapter filled with potential. By the end of 2018, her decision was final. Senego symbolized independence, new connections, and the career growth she longed for. The transition happened quickly. Packing her belongings and saying goodbye to her loved ones, she set off for the city that she hoped would become her new home. After moving to Senego, Julia immediately immersed herself in work. The city's real estate market was fast-paced, competitive, required confidence and persistence. She adapted quickly, building connections, attending networking events, and closing deals. Her new life was exciting, but amid her busy schedule, she found herself longing for something more: personal happiness. It was during this time that she met Alexander. Their paths crossed at a Milan bar where her colleagues had invited her to celebrate a successful deal. Alexander worked as a bartender at a high-end lounge inside a 5-star hotel. A year older than Julia, he was charming, outgoing, and had a natural ability to connect with people. His confidence and charisma drew her in. With him, she felt like she could relax, momentarily escape the pressures of work, and simply enjoy the present. The first few weeks of their relationship felt effortless. They spent evenings dining at restaurants, strolling through the city at night, and talking about the future. Alexander shared that he had a son from a previous relationship but assured her that his past was behind him and that he was now looking for stability. Julia sincerely hoped that her move to Senego would bring not only career growth but also personal fulfillment. She was convinced that Alexander was the person she was meant to build a future with. Julia believed she had finally met someone with whom she could build a lasting relationship. Their romance moved quickly, and within a few months, they decided to move in together. She had no idea what secrets he was hiding or how much her decision would change the course of her life. Tensions in Julia's relationship with Alexander were growing. She felt that something was wrong, but she couldn't pinpoint the issue. As time went on, the discomfort increased, while Alexander continued to act as if everything was normal. By the end of 2022, Julia noticed changes in her body, constant fatigue, strange cravings, and a missed period led her to suspect that something was different. Not wanting to wait any longer, she bought a pregnancy test. She then realized she was pregnant. This news brought mixed feelings. She had always wanted a family, but the past few months with Alexander had been challenging. Nonetheless, she knew she needed to tell him in person. Nervously, Julia chose the right moment to share the news. She had thought about various possible reactions: surprise, joy, maybe even fear, but Alexander's expression was unreadable. After a few seconds of silence, he finally asked one question: "Are you sure?" Julia felt a chilling distance in his demeanor. He showed no curiosity and asked no questions about how far along she was or how she was feeling. His indifference was impossible to ignore. In the days that followed, he never brought up the topic again. No discussions about the future, no interest in upcoming doctor's visits. Julia felt abandoned but held on to hope that in time he would come to terms with the situation. The new year began, but Alexander's attitude remained unchanged. More and more, Julia found herself spending evenings alone, contemplating her future. She kept working, trying to focus on other things, but an uneasy feeling grew inside her. Meanwhile, Alexander's double life took an unexpected turn. In early 2023, he learned that his other partner, Allegra Syria, was also expecting. The news caught him completely off guard. Just like Julia, Allegra had no idea that another woman was in her life. She truly believed she and Alexander were in a committed relationship. Unlike Julia, however, Allegra was unsure whether she wanted to continue the pregnancy. Alexander convinced Allegra that having a child wasn't the right decision at that moment. He assured her that he would support whatever choice she made, but strongly implied that ending the pregnancy would be for the best. Allegra hesitated for a long time but eventually agreed. Alexander accompanied her to the medical procedure, ensuring that this chapter was closed. He hoped that with Allegra's pregnancy no longer an issue, he could now focus on dealing with what he saw as his bigger problem: Julia's decision to have the baby. Unlike Allegra, Julia was determined to continue her pregnancy. Despite his emotional distance, Alexander repeatedly tried to persuade her to reconsider, but Julia refused to change her mind. For her, this was a conscious and personal decision. She knew that her relationship with Alexander was falling apart, but she was prepared to raise the baby on her own. What she didn't realize was that this choice would become a turning point in her life. After Julia refused to terminate the pregnancy, Alexander realized he was losing control of the situation. Her firm decision disrupted his plans and forced him to look for another way to free himself from what he saw as a problem. He had begun systematically researching poisons. He scoured the internet for methods to cause harm without raising suspicion, analyzing which substances were both effective and difficult to detect. His research covered chemical compounds found in household products, plant-based toxins, and even highly dangerous substances like cyanide. However, most of the options he found were either too difficult to obtain or left clear traces in the body. Eventually, he settled on rodenticides, products designed to eliminate rodents. These were widely available over the counter and wouldn't raise any red flags. He also found information suggesting that certain types worked slowly, causing internal bleeding, weakness, and anemia symptoms that could easily be mistaken for pregnancy complications. After, Alexander began putting his plan into action. He started adding small amounts of the toxic substance to Julia's food and drinks, hoping that her health would gradually decline. Within weeks, she began experiencing unusual symptoms: constant exhaustion, dizziness, nausea, and sharp abdominal pain. Julia confided in her friends about how unwell she felt but assumed it was just part of the pregnancy. She had no idea that something much more sinister was happening. Alexander closely monitored her condition, expecting the effects to intensify, but the poison wasn't working as quickly as he had hoped. Frustrated, he continued to try increasing its dosage, but the results were still disappointing. Julia still felt sick, but her body was fighting back, and the pregnancy was progressing. This infuriated Alexander. His original plan had failed, and now he was forced to consider another way out. Alexander was accustomed to being in control of situations. He skillfully crafted his lies, knowing exactly what to say to persuade each woman to accept his version of reality. Julia thought he was merely going through a tough time and believed he would eventually come to terms with the pregnancy. Allegra, meanwhile, was convinced that his past relationship had ended long ago. But one misstep shattered his carefully maintained facade. The first sign of trouble for Allegra was how uncomfortable Alexander became whenever his past was mentioned. He avoided talking about his life before they met, never shared his social media accounts, and didn't mention his ex. Initially, this didn't seem suspicious, but over time, the inconsistencies began to accumulate. The turning point occurred when she accidentally discovered recent photos on his phone, images of him with Julia. Their expressions and body language indicated that their relationship was still very much alive. Allegra didn't want to leap to conclusions, so she started observing him more closely and taking mental notes. He frequently left in the evenings, saying he was working late, but his co-workers at the hotel disclosed that he had actually clocked out early. At times, he wouldn't answer his phone, only to later offer excuses that didn't quite make sense. When Allegra confronted Alexander about the photos, he responded immediately. He accused Julia of being unable to accept their breakup and spreading the pictures to make him feel guilty. Allegra wanted to trust his explanation, but it felt off to her. As she asked more questions, Alexander's answers became less convincing. Realizing he was losing control, he quickly changed his story. He claimed that Julia not only refused to move on but had also faked her pregnancy to try to keep him. In a last-ditch effort to support his lie, Alexander even created a fake DNA test. He modified a file he found online and presented it as evidence that he was not the child's father. Although Allegra initially believed him, her doubts persisted. She couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story than she knew. A few days later, Allegra decided to investigate for herself. While Alexander was sleeping, she took his phone, found Julia's number, and sent her a message. Julia replied almost immediately, and her tone wasn't one of revenge, rather, she was also seeking answers. The next day, Allegra proposed they meet in person. Both women realized that this conversation had the potential to change everything. On May 27, 2023, they agreed to meet at Armani Hotel where Allegra worked, feeling a mix of tension and determination. Allegra was still unaware of the full extent of Alexander's betrayal, while Julia was shocked to learn that the man she had envisioned a future with was living a double life. Their meeting began cautiously. Allegra spoke first, revealing what she had uncovered. She explained how Alexander had convinced her that his past relationship was completely over, and she mentioned the supposed DNA test that indicated the baby wasn't his. Julia listened intently. Once Allegra finished, Julia calmly clarified that the test was fake. She had never asked for a test, and the timeline of her pregnancy corresponded perfectly with their relationship. More importantly, she disclosed that she and Alexander were still living together, and he had never given her any indication that their relationship was ending. As the minutes passed, Allegra began to see the reality of the situation. She realized she had been deceived from the beginning. Her entire view of their relationship changed, and for the first time, she felt certain about the truth. Although she was hurt and disappointed, she held no resentment toward Julia. It became painfully clear that both women had fallen victim to the same web of lies. Their conversation lasted more than an hour as them shared details, gradually uncovering the full extent of Alexander's deceit. Eventually, they moved from seeing each other as rivals to feeling connected. In that moment, Julia made a decisive choice. She was finished with Alexander. Her future was for herself and her child. Alexander had no role in it now. Upon returning home, Julia confronted Alexander right away, revealing that she knew everything and that their relationship was over. He initially denied everything and then became defensive, accusing her of intruding into his private matters. However, Julia disregarded his excuses, firmly stated that she was leaving for Naples and didn't want any further contact with him. That evening, she texted her mother and sister to explain her decision. They fully supported her and offered assistance in any way they could. Julia reassured them, saying she needed to handle a few things in Milan first but would be home in a few days. After their conversation, Alexander realized he had lost control. Everything he had concealed was now revealed. Julia knew the truth about his double life, his lies, and his manipulation. She no longer trusted him or listened to his words. She had made a firm decision to leave him. That day, the tension between them reached. Julia ignored all of Alexander's attempts to engage her. She focused solely on packing her belongings, showing no emotion. Her silence only intensified his frustration. Alexander pleaded with her, insisting she was making a mistake, declaring his love, and urging her to reconsider, but Julia remained silent. His anger escalated as he raised his voice in desperation, seeking any reaction from her. When he realized she had made up her mind, a wave of uncontrollable rage consumed him. In a moment of blind fury, he grabbed a knife from the counter and attacked. Julia had no opportunity to defend herself. The assault was swift and precise. But for Alexander, it was not enough to stop there. Driven by panic and fear of being exposed, he continued his assault, losing all sense of restraint. Realizing he needed to eliminate the evidence, he dragged her to the bathroom. He poured alcohol over her and set her on fire, hoping the flames would destroy any evidence. However, the fire only caused burns and did not fully consume. Frantically, he grabbed rags, cleaning supplies, scrubbing the blood from the floor, walls, and furniture. Despite his efforts, the stains persisted. The apartment still resembled a crime scene. He understood that he couldn't completely erase what had happened, but he believed he could find a way to avoid being held responsible. Having failed to destroy the evidence through fire, he needed a new strategy. His first step was to stage her disappearance, making it seem like Julia had left on her own. He took her phone, began messaging her family and friends. Knowing they would be concerned if she suddenly went missing, he crafted messages to imply she had chosen to leave. He sent a brief, vague text to her mother, stating that she needed some time alone. Then, he messaged one of her friends, claiming that she had left but wasn't ready to discuss her whereabouts. He intended to buy himself some time to make it appear that Julia had simply vanished. However, his plan didn't stop there. He was aware that someone would eventually alert the authorities, so, on May 28, 2023, he went to the police and reported Julia missing. He claimed that they had an argument and she left the house, never to return. His story was straightforward. That morning he had gone to work, and when he came back, she was gone. He's saying that her personal belongings, including her passport and money, were missing, implying she had left town voluntarily. Investigators paid close attention, but right from the beginning, something felt off. His behavior raised suspicion. He spoke too confidently, almost as if he already knew what questions the officers would ask. In contrast to Julia's family and friends, who were frantic, desperate for information, he remained unsettlingly calm. While the police organized a search, Alexander concentrated on concealing the evidence. He wrapped the body in a plastic bag and moved them to the garage. Over the next few days, he relocated the body several times, first hiding them in the basement of their building, then bringing them back to the garage. He was trying to find a way to get rid of them for good, but the longer he waited, the more mistakes he made. Investigators started examining his statements closely, interviewing neighbors, and searching for inconsistencies. He thought he was still in control, but law enforcement was closing in. After Alexander reported Julia missing, the police followed their standard procedures for such cases. The first significant clue came when forensic specialists found traces of blood in his car. Despite his attempts to clean it, modern technology allowed investigators to identify the biological evidence, which was confirmed to belong to Julia. The second piece of evidence was uncovered in the common areas of their apartment building. Faint reddish stains on the stairs and in the hallway initially appeared to be dust or spilled liquid. However, chemical testing revealed they were traces of partially cleaned blood. Investigators noted Alexander's strange behavior. Unlike most people whose loved ones disappear, he showed little genuine concern. He did not reach out to Julia's family for help in finding her, nor did he actively participate in spreading information about her disappearance. He only completed the formal steps to report her missing, which raised further suspicions. A major breakthrough in the case occurred when detectives analyzed his electronic devices. They confiscated his phone, computer, and tablet, revealing alarming findings. First, they discovered a search history that dated back several months before the crime. He had been researching poisons, learning about the effects of various toxins, and reading articles on how to discreetly harm someone. Some searches even questioned why certain toxic substances might fail to work. Another crucial piece of evidence was the forged DNA test he had shown Algra. Forensic analysis confirmed that the document had been tampered with and that it was downloaded from a website that allowed users to edit medical records. As more evidence accumulated, Alexander's story began to unravel. Investigators increased their pressure, systematically highlighting inconsistencies in his account. Initially, he maintained his innocence, claiming he knew nothing about it. However, with each interrogation, the police presented undeniable facts. They showed him photographs of blood stains, confronted him with his search history. They brought in witnesses who reported hearing loud noises and shouting from Alexander's apartment. A significant breakthrough in the investigation happened when authorities examined Alexander's actions after Julia went missing. Surveillance cameras showed him making several trips to the garage, where he carried plastic bags inside and later came out empty-handed. Eventually, he confessed and revealed where he had hidden her body. On June 1, 2023, police found Julia's remains in a dense area near Sago. Forensic examination indicated that someone had tried to burn the body, but the attempt was not completed. Despite his efforts to conceal the truth, experts were able to determine how she died and gather conclusive evidence linking him to the crime. The tragic death of Giulia Tramontano shocked people all over Italy, a country where gender-based violence is a serious issue. After Alexander was arrested, protests began nationwide. Women filled the streets, carrying signs and demanding stricter punishments for domestic violence. Memorial marches took place in cities like Milan, Naples, and Rome, calling for systemic changes to better protect vulnerable individuals. At one rally, Giulia's sister, Chiara Tramontano, urged lawmakers to take action against the increasing number of cases where offenders face no significant consequences until it is too late. Forensic experts and investigators focused on understanding the psychological profile of Alexander. A psychological evaluation revealed troubling behavioral traits. Court-appointed psychiatrists determined that he exhibited strong narcissistic tendencies, showing no remorse for his actions. His behavior during interrogations and court appearances demonstrated a profound self-centeredness, an utter lack of empathy. He viewed others only in terms of how they could serve his interests, ignoring their feelings. His actions were motivated solely by a need to protect his reputation and keep control over those around him. Any perceived loss of power triggered a quick and dangerous reaction. During the trial, Alexander tried to appear remorseful, but neither Giulia's family nor the public found his words convincing. He claimed to be baffled about how he could commit such a horrific act, asserting it was a moment of impulsive rage that he didn't fully recognize. However, prosecutors presented compelling evidence: his online searches for poisons, the attempted poisoning, the falsified DNA test, and the false report he filed with the police. Each piece of evidence demonstrated that the crime was premeditated. After Alexander's arrest, Algra decided to help the authorities. She provided them with her messages with him, revealing that he had lied to both her and Giulia. During the trial, Algra also testified about the fake DNA test and his many attempts to manipulate her. As a witness, she was called by prosecutors to confirm important details, including how Alexander concealed his double life, lied about Giulia's pregnancy, and made excuses when the truth began to emerge. She realized that if she hadn't stumbled upon those photos on his phone, the truth could have remained hidden for much longer. During her testimony, she expressed the guilt she felt toward Giulia, even though she too had been a victim of his lies. After the trial, Algra chose not to speak to journalists, stayed out of the public eye, and tried to create some distance from the tragedy. Reports suggest that she later left Milan for another city, hoping to rebuild her life. The court found Alexander Impagnatiel guilty of first-degree murder, highlighting aggravating factors such as the cruelty of the crime, the ongoing emotional abuse inflicted on the victim, and his intentional efforts to destroy evidence. He was sentenced to life in prison. In the judge's closing remarks, it was stated that such crimes cannot be justified as mere lapses in control or temporary emotional turmoil. Alexander's actions over several months showed a clear and deliberate intention to eliminate Julia. Julia's case serves as a tragic reminder of the risks posed by individuals who view their partners as possessions. It raised awareness and contributed to a larger movement aimed at protecting those who are still in danger. Julia Tramontano's radiant spirit, marked by her ambition, warmth, and unwavering resolve, continues to resonate far beyond the tragedy that claimed her life. Her courage in the face of betrayal and her dreams for her unborn child remain a powerful testament to the strength of the human heart. Through the tireless advocacy of her mother, Loredana Femiano, and sister, Chiara Tramontano, Julia's legacy fuels a growing movement to combat gender-based violence, inspiring communities to stand united for justice and protection. In every heart she touched, Julia's light shines on, a beacon of hope and a call to build a world where no one suffers in silence. Geraldine Kriegel and Patrick Kriegel lived in Ireland. In 2006, they celebrated their 20th wedding anniversary. They had a wonderful relationship. Even though they faced infertility, they did not lose hope. Both had successful careers, financial stability, and they wanted to adopt. They were waiting for confirmation of their documents. Finally, Geraldine and Patrick received news that a 2-year-old girl from Russia is available for adoption. Her name was Anastasia. She was born on February 18, 2004, in Novokuznetsk, Russia. Immediately after birth, she was taken to an orphanage because her biological mother was unable to provide for her. Anastasia spent her entire childhood mostly alone, as the caregivers primarily focused on more demanding children. This lack of attention resulted in her having difficulty expressing emotions. Geraldine and Patrick was overjoyed when they learned about Anastasia. They quickly developed a close relationship with her. On August 10, 2006, they brought her home, and this date became a family holiday. From now on, her name is Anastasia Anna Kriegel, affectionately called Anna. The day when laughter filled their home was the day that Geraldine and Patrick truly became parents. They wanted Anna to remember her culture, so they bought her a matryoshka doll. The once quiet life of Geraldine and Patrick turned into a fun adventure. Anna was daddy's angel and mommy's princess. They tried to diversify their lives as much as possible. They went ice skating and planned excursions every summer. They vacationed in Patrick's hometown of Annecy, France, where they had a house, and Anna made several friends. She always looked forward to this trip, enjoyed France, and even studied French. However, there were obstacles in Anna's life. She struggled with learning English, and her mother helped her because she wanted Anna to be able to communicate with her peers. Anna also faced challenges in forming close relationships and expressing her emotions. Time spent without adequate care in the orphanage led her to be uncomfortable with physical affection. Nonetheless, Geraldine and Patrick were able to help Anna overcome this emotional emptiness through their unconditional love, support. A nurturing environment, combined with educational activities, healthy eating, and sports, laid a solid foundation for Anna's future. Unfortunately, the girl also faced health concerns. During a routine examination, the doctor discovered a tumor in her right ear, which caused hearing loss, as well as partial blindness in her right eye. Despite these difficulties, Anna grew into an energetic and joyful girl. However, her hearing and vision problems made studying difficult, leading to poor academic performance in elementary school. She attended consultations with specialists until the 3rd grade in order to keep up with her peers. In her everyday life, Anna took her challenges to heart. This affected her self-esteem and diminished her desire to live in this world. One day, While walking home and enjoying the fresh air with music playing through her favorite headphones, she encountered 4 boys who blocked her path. They made fun of her, one even pinched her. Anna ran home in tears and told her mother. Geraldine and Patrick took this incident seriously and filed a complaint against the boys, informing the police about the boy who had touched Anna. However, he was let off with just a warning. Consequently, the parents decided to accompany Anna to school and pick her up every day themselves, but this led to more ridicule. She vented her feelings on social media, seeking acceptance from her peers. This situation deeply affected Geraldine. It was painful for her to see how unhappy her daughter was. Soon, Anna began to inflict physical harm on herself to drown out the emotional pain. The parents realized the severity of the situation and worried that their child might take more drastic actions. Geraldine's only wish was for her daughter to be happy. Finally, Anna began to show signs of improvement thanks to personal therapy. She made some friends with whom she had sleepovers, went for walks, watched movies, discussed boys. As Anna's high school education was coming to an end, on a sunny day, May 13, 2018, Geraldine wanted to help her daughter prepare for a test. On weekends, they usually did their homework together. Their hard work, that day they decided to take a break. They turned on the TV, made popcorn, and watched a movie while hugging Anna's cousins. Geraldine joined them and ordered pizza. The children played games while the adults sipped wine and enjoyed snacks, filling the house with a joyful atmosphere. May 14, 2018, began as usual. Geraldine got on the train headed to Dublin while Anna went to school. After lunch, she had an appointment with a psychologist. Patrick, who had retired by this time, took the opportunity to sleep a little longer. Classes ended at 4 p.m., and Anna called her mother, but there was no answer because Geraldine was at an important meeting. She wrote a message to her daughter, saying that she would call back soon. When Anna came home, Patrick was relaxing in the garden and heard the doorbell. A young man was standing at the threshold. He was the same age as Anna. Patrick was not expecting guests, and Anna was surprised to see the guy. Patrick had never seen him before. Anna's joy was obvious. She whispered something to the guy, grabbed her favorite sweater, and told her father that she would be back soon. Patrick reminded her that she needed to study, which she had forgotten because of the sudden guest. He saw them leave for the park. Patrick was not immediately worried since the park was only a 20-minute walk from their home. At 5:10 p.m., Geraldine returned home and tried to call Anna, but she did not answer. Not wanting to overreact, she thought Anna would be home soon. However, Anna did not return. Patrick told his wife that Anna had gone to the park with some guy. This was strange considering Anna's difficulties with communication. Geraldine immediately texted Anna, asking her to come home. When there was still no answer, it alarmed the parents, especially considering Anna's previous issues with bullying and her health problems. Concerned, Geraldine decided to go to the park, but there were no traces of Anna there. Geraldine and Patrick began searching the streets in their car, trying to find any signs of Anna. Their fear deepened when they realized they knew nothing about the young man Anna had been with. By their own efforts proved unsuccessful, by 9 p.m., they reported Anna's disappearance to the police, emphasizing that her lack of response to calls and messages was out of character for her. They also informing the police about the unknown guy. The police quickly tracked down the young man, whose name was Boy B. His family was surprised by the police's arrival. Investigators asked Boy B to describe Anna's whereabouts, and he said that they had walked together until 5:40 p.m. before he went home. After that, the police began searching for Anna. They combed the area and reviewed footage from surveillance cameras. Patrick and Geraldine provided photographs of Anna, including one in which she was wearing the black sweatshirt she had worn in that evening. Supporters gathered around Geraldine and Patrick, while the police carefully studied video recordings showing Boy B and Anna in the park around 5 p.m. At 5:14 p.m., they left the park through a different exit, but after that, Anna seemed to have vanished without a trace. Her disappearance became a mystery. Progress in the investigation was made when they managed to find a witness who saw Anna and Boy B walking through the park. Video footage captured Boy B walking alone through the park at 5:49 p.m. Under pressure from the police, Boy B admitted that he was with another friend named Boy A. Boy A liked Anna, and Boy B was acting as an intermediary between them. With this new information, investigators intensified their efforts and began broadcasting information about the search for Anna across all social networks, as well as in local newspapers. Simultaneously, they searched for Boy A. His backpack was found. Video footage showed him entering and exiting the park, but he had been absent for a long time. Some opinions suggested that Anna might have run away, but this theory was quickly dismissed. To resolve the mystery of Anna's disappearance, detectives organized a step-by-step recreation of the events that had occurred in the park that day alongside Boy B and Boy A, under their parents' supervision. The interaction between the boys raised the police's suspicions, so they were separated for individual interrogations. Boy B's testimony remained consistent. Boy B began the interview the previous day by repeating what he had told police the previous week, that Boy A had asked him to call Anna's house, in Leixlip, just outside Dublin in County Kildare, and bring her to meet him at St. Catherine's Park, so they could talk. And that he had left Anna with Boy A before going home to do his homework. During the investigation, police reviewed more than 700 hours of CCTV footage from the area around where Anna went missing. The detectives, Delray and Gannon, repeatedly told Boy B that the route he claimed they had taken that day did not match what was recorded by cameras in and around St. Catherine's Park, which is on the Lucan side of Leixlip, on the border between County Kildare and County Dublin. But Boy B stuck to his story, offering various explanations to police about the inconsistencies between the CCTV footage and his account. They said that, on a later occasion, they were attacked by two strange men, resulting in a fight where Boy A hit one of the men on the head. Both men ran away. He then showed the police the injuries they had inflicted, including scratches on his arms and legs and a cut on his face. These men could have been responsible for Anna's disappearance, so the detectives needed their descriptions. The police also seized the boys' belongings to conduct examinations for DNA evidence of the attackers. As the investigation progressed, police brought in specialized search units, including divers and a rescue team, to check nearby bodies of water. In total, 60 people were involved in the search for Anna, including volunteers and the Kriegel family. Anna's disappearance became a sensational news story. Her photo in a black sweatshirt became a symbol of her search. Near the park, there is Glenwood House, a derelict farmhouse designed by James Gondon in the 19th century, located in a town of Coldblow, west of Lucan. One of the eyewitnesses reported seeing young people and police entering it, so the police went there to investigate. The house was 2 stories, sat on 42 acres of land. It was in ruins, with the roofs and walls having collapsed. It is unclear why the police had not checked there earlier. They conducted a thorough examination of both the house itself and the fields behind it. The search began in the park, where they meticulously searched every bush before gradually moving toward the abandoned house. The police checked the utility room while the volunteers searched the main building. It was very dark inside as there was no light in the room. The policeman was taken aback by the pungent smell filling the room. Once his eyes adjusted to the darkness, he realized that in front of him lay a naked female body, next to which lay clothes and a broken telephone. On the floor, there were traces of blood beside a brick and a large branch. Judging by the clothing, it was the body of Anna. There were multiple wounds on her body, and her neck was wrapped in duct tape. Her hand lay as if she had been trying to tear off the duct tape herself. It was evident that she had fought valiantly for her life. Her naked body, wearing only socks, lay among broken bottles and garbage. Many questions arose about how this could have happened, who was responsible for this crime. Why was Anna in this building? This incident irrevocably changed the lives of Geraldine and Patrick. The death of their long-awaited and beloved daughter was an indescribable tragedy for them. The whole city learned the details of what happened, and most people were in shock. Glenwood House, located near the park where children had played peacefully, was now the scene of a terrible crime. An autopsy revealed that Anna had sustained about a dozen wounds all over her body, including bruises and cuts, primarily on her head, face, and neck. The cause of death was attributed to blunt force trauma to the head, as well as asphyxiation, indicating that Anna had been abused. Based on the traces of semen found, it remains unclear whether she was conscious during the assault. Her death occurred between 5:25 and 5:54 p.m., just a few minutes after she left the park. At the entrance to the building, she was struck with a heavy stick that had nails sticking out of it before being hit with a brick. Blood on the walls and evidence suggested that the attacker dragged her body to the window, most likely to limit visibility for anyone outside. After collecting all the evidence, the police arrested two individuals. Boy B and Boy A, who were last seen with Anna, were suspected of the murder. In Boy A's backpack, a mask with the image of a zombie was found with traces of Anna's blood, along with gloves, shin guards, and knee pads. The semen found matched Boy A's DNA. Anna's blood was also located on his shoes and clothes. His mother believed he had been attacked and then washed his clothing. Boy A denied involvement in Anna's death despite the evidence found at the crime scene. No DNA was detected from Boy B, and there was no blood found on his belongings. During interrogation, Boy B admitted that he had seen Anna enter the abandoned house with Boy A but was unaware of his friend's intentions. Boy B wanted to approach the house but was frightened by screams at the entrance. He witnessed Boy A tearing off Anna's clothes and then turned to Boy B, his face reflecting the danger that prompted Boy B to remain silent. It later emerged that Boy A had shared his vile plans with Boy B. Both boys were released on bail pending a trial date, which angered local residents not only because they feared for their safety but also because the identities of the criminals had not been made public. Both boys came from respectable and successful families and had no criminal histories or psychological problems, which surprised the residents of the city. The hearing of their case took place on April 29, 2019. It was a closed hearing, attended by the parents of the defendants, as well as Geraldine and Patrick, who found the proceedings difficult but promised to defend their daughter to the end. The prosecutor stated that Boy B had lured Anna out of the house under the pretense of facilitating a meeting with Boy A, whom she liked, while Boy A took her to the abandoned house and abused her. The jury trial took place on June 18. Boy A was sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 12 years. Boy B was also found guilty in Anna's death, receiving a 15-year sentence with the possibility of parole after 8 years, despite the lack of material evidence. According to the law, their identities must remain confidential. If released, they would be given new identification. However, the harshest sentence was borne by Anna's parents, as Geraldine stated that life without Anna had ceased to hold meaning. Patrick died on June 19, 2022, haunted by the guilt of allowing his daughter to go with a stranger that day. The tragic loss of Anna Kriegel left an indelible mark on her family and the community of Leixlip. Geraldine and Patrick, who had poured their love, hope into building a joyful life for their adopted daughter, were shattered by her brutal murder. The conviction of Boy A and Boy B, though a step toward justice, could not fill the void left by Anna's absence. Anna's memory lives on in the hearts of those who loved her. Alicia Bromfield was born on August 28, 1990, in Joliet, Illinois, to James and Sherry Anisic. She has 4 siblings, an older sister named Brianna and 3 older brothers named Luke, Chase, and Colton. Since childhood, Alicia has been known for her high energy and cheerful personality. Her family is very important to her, especially her mother and grandmother, who have always provided her with support and comfort. The loss of her grandmother was a profound blow to Alicia, leaving a lasting impact on her life. Even though she has experienced pain, she has never lost her joy for life or her optimism. She was an energetic child, always smiling and ready for new adventures. At school, Alicia was active and engaged, and she enjoyed spending time in nature. She graduated from Joliet Catholic Academy in 2008 and later pursued studies in criminal justice and forensic psychology at Western Illinois University. After Alicia's parents divorced when she was young, her relationship with her mother deepened. She primarily lived with her mother, and when her mother remarried, she felt genuinely happy, embracing the idea of a big, loving family, something she had always dreamed of creating for herself in the future. Becoming a mother was one of Alicia's most important aspirations, as she felt that motherhood was a significant part of her purpose. At 16, Alicia started working at Grand Flower Growers, where she made beautiful floral arrangements sold at a nearby Home Depot. She had a natural talent for design and loved seeing her creativity bring joy to others. This job is also ideal for a student like her, flexible, stable, and paid right away. However, there was a troubling aspect to her experience. Her supervisor, 35-year-old Brian Cooper, soon became inappropriately interested in her. What began as a work-related conversation gradually became more personal. Brian started pushing for a romantic relationship, which Alicia consistently refused. He was nearly twice her age, and his behavior was not only inappropriate but also unsettling. This situation was difficult for Alicia to handle. Brian was her boss, and she had to interact with him almost every day. She couldn't quit because she needed the job to support her college expenses. Alicia tried to remain professional and not encourage Brian to pursue her. However, he ignored her boundaries and continued to pursue her. She reported his behavior to the company multiple times, stating that he yelled at her when she rejected his advances, called her derogatory names, and spread negative gossip about her. He misused his authority by denying her breaks and assigning her extra hours to punish her for not reciprocating his feelings. Additionally, he spread rumors among colleagues, falsely claiming that she was his girlfriend. Despite these challenges, Alicia remained resilient. She continued to juggle school, her personal life, and a toxic work atmosphere for 5 long years. By the age of 21, while still working at Grand Flower Growers and still facing Brian's disturbing behavior, Alicia unexpectedly discovered she was pregnant. The father was a fellow university student, not Brian, but he chose to be uninvolved in the child's life. Although Alicia felt heartbroken by his absence, she was thrilled about becoming a mother and more determined than ever to create a wonderful life for her baby. Alicia couldn't quit her job because she needed to save money for herself and her child while finishing her studies. She was delighted to find out that she was pregnant with a baby girl, whom she named Ava Lucille, expressing her love for her daughter. However, she is facing trouble with her boss, Brian Cooper. Despite learning about her pregnancy, Brian became more controlling instead of being supportive. He coerced her into working overtime, altered her work schedule without prior notice, and threatened to terminate her employment if she missed even a single day to see a doctor. Although Alicia tried to maintain a professional environment, Brian continued to harass her. He made her run personal errands, including walking his dog, and threatened her job if she refused. Alicia felt trapped. She was about to become a mother, and every dollar counted. Quitting so close to her due date wasn't feasible. Unfortunately, when she complained to upper management, nothing improved. The only action taken was asking Brian to leave early and attend anger management classes, but he never attended those sessions. As the weeks went by, Alicia became increasingly worn out, both physically and emotionally. She decided to confide in her mother, Sherry, hoping that someone would finally listen and offer support. Alicia felt she had done everything right. She had filed complaints, stood firm, and remained resilient. Yet, no one seemed to hold Brian accountable for his actions. In August 2012, Brian confronted Alicia with a new request. He wanted her to attend his sister's wedding with him. Alicia immediately refused, as the thought of spending a weekend with the man who had made her life so difficult was unbearable. However, Brian was persistent and threatened her job if she didn't comply. Alicia felt trapped. If she said no, she risked losing her job at a time when finding new work could be very challenging due to her pregnancy. Unsure of what to do, she shared the invitation with her mother. Sherry advised her to quit the job altogether, but Brian reassured them that his request was simply a friendly gesture. He promised that the entire wedding party would be in the same hotel and that he would behave appropriately. This slightly eased Alicia's anxiety, leading her to reluctantly agree to attend while establishing clear boundaries. She made it clear that this was not a date. She was going as a friend and believed that there would be people around to support her if she felt unsafe. On August 18th, Alicia and Brian traveled to Wisconsin, planning to stay at Sand Bay Beach Resort. Alicia believed that Brian's family would be there and that she wouldn't be alone. However, this assumption changed as soon as they arrived. She found out that she and Brian were at a different resort than the other guests. In fact, they were entirely alone, no family or wedding party, just the two of them. This understandably made Alicia feel angry and anxious. She immediately texted her mom, saying they had an argument and were heading home. Her mother, Sherry, found this strange, since Brian was supposed to walk his older sister down the aisle, so they couldn't go out. Not long after, Alicia sent another text message to her mother, informing her that they had reconciled and decided to stay. In retrospect, the message seemed suspicious, yet Alicia had genuinely written it. Later that day, she even attended the wedding with Brian. There's a photo of them smiling for the camera, but what no one at the wedding could see was the underlying truth. Brian was once again pressuring Alicia to act like they were a couple. Alicia had made her point many times, but Brian continued to cross the line. With no one around to intervene, Alicia reached her breaking point. She was tired of the games, manipulation, and lies. All she wanted was to move on, focus on her baby, and leave Brian and this nightmare behind for good. Alicia made it clear that once the wedding weekend was over and they returned to Illinois, she would cut all ties with Brian. She no longer wanted awkward friendships or professional courtesies, she wanted to completely sever ties with him. And who could blame her? After years of unwanted attention and pressure from Brian, Alicia had finally had enough. However, she found herself stranded miles from home in Wisconsin without her own car. Since Brian had driven them there, she had no option but to rely on him to get back home. When Alicia told Brian that she didn't want to continue the relationship, Brian underwent a change internally. He didn't react immediately, but his silence revealed his mood. He felt angry and rejected. The situation worsened when he started drinking, further deteriorating his mood. After the wedding concluded, the tension between them was palpable. Alicia and Brian returned to the hotel where they were staying. Although they slept separately, Alicia did not want to share a room with him. If she had the choice, she wouldn't want to be under the same roof as Brian for another second. However, Alicia felt exhausted because she was nearly 7 months pregnant. She had been on her feet all day, not only because of the wedding but also due to Brian's constant manipulation. All she wanted was to get some sleep. They were scheduled to leave the next morning, and she just needed to hold on a bit longer. Brian, on the other hand, was struggling to accept reality. He realized this was the end. Alicia had made her boundaries clear, and he was losing control over her for good, which sent him into a downward spiral. While Alicia managed to fall asleep, Brian sat nearby, drink in hand, watching her. He remained there for almost 2 hours, simmering with rage and darker thoughts. In a final, desperate attempt, he woke her and asked once more if she would go out with him. Alicia's response was a firm no. That one word triggered a violent reaction in Brian. In a fit of rage, he attacked Alicia as she lay in bed, suddenly awakened by the assault. She fought back, crying out for her life and for her unborn child, but Brian continued. In a horrific act, he took both Alicia's life and that of her baby. It is truly unimaginable to contemplate the last moments of Alicia, just a few hours away from going home, when she was attacked by the man who had tormented her for many years. Tragically, the nightmare didn't end there. After murdering Alicia, Brian committed another vile act by taking photos of her lifeless body. Eventually, he passed out in the bathtub. The next morning, he tried to end his life but was unsuccessful. Instead, he got out, still wet, and walked to a nearby gas station. The employees stared in disbelief as he approached the counter to ask for a phone. When the 911 operator answered and asked who the criminal was, Brian replied, with unsettling calm, that it was him and that he had done it. The police quickly arrived and arrested him on the spot. Alicia's life, filled with love and potential, was taken far too soon. She deserved much more, as did her baby. During a police interview, Brian confessed to all the accusations against him. However, in a desperate attempt to justify his actions, he claimed he and Alicia were in a romantic relationship. He asserted that he wanted a serious commitment, but Alicia did not. He even went so far as to say he backed off when he learned she was pregnant with another man's child, which was a complete lie. The only true aspect of Brian's story was his motive. Alicia had made it clear that she wanted nothing to do with him anymore. When the investigation continued, the police arrived at Sand Bay Beach Resort and entered the room where Brian and Alicia had stayed. Inside, they encountered a heartbreaking sight. Alicia lay lifeless on the bed, covered with a sheet, with a pillow placed under her head. It was evident that Brian had staged the scene before leaving. Officers then had the difficult task of informing Alicia's family of the tragic news. When an officer knocked on Sherry's door, she instinctively felt that something was wrong. The officer delivered the devastating news: her daughter and unborn granddaughter were victims of homicide. Sherry's life was shattered, and she was overwhelmed with grief and guilt for not being able to protect her daughter and for not intervening with Brian sooner. Despite the family's immense pain, the investigation did not end there. Scrutinizing Brian's history revealed a disturbing pattern of behavior. Alicia was not his only victim. Another female coworker had accused him of groping her, causing her to leave her job after filing a complaint. He had a troubling history of abuse, including an incident in which he restrained a former girlfriend who didn't comply with him. Police discovered multiple complaints that Alicia had lodged against Brian, yet management had taken little to no action. Brian had secretly installed hidden cameras throughout his home and even in Alicia's hotel room. Unbeknownst to her, Alicia was recorded during ordinary activities, such as walking the dog or using the bathroom. This invasive surveillance was also discovered in the hotel where Alicia spent her final moments. Brian's actions constituted a severe violation of her privacy. Despite the substantial evidence against him, Brian pleaded not guilty, claiming that alcohol impaired his judgment and that he wasn't fully aware of his actions. The prosecution countered this by highlighting that he had a clear memory of events, including his contemplation of ending his life afterward and his call to 911 to confess that it had been him who did it. They argued that Brian had premeditated the murder, indicating it was not an impulsive act. Despite the evidence, the jury in the first trial was unable to reach a unanimous verdict. A year later, in a second trial, the evidence was presented again, and this time the jury found Brian Cooper guilty of 2 counts of first-degree intentional homicide, one for Alicia and one for her unborn child. On July 27, 2014, exactly 2 years after the tragedy, Brian Cooper received a sentence of 2 life terms in prison. He is currently incarcerated at Dodge Correctional Institution in Wisconsin, a maximum security facility previously known as Central State Hospital for the Criminally Insane. Notorious killers like Jeffrey Dahmer and Ed Gein have been housed there, as well as Chris Watts, who murdered his wife and daughters. Brian will never be released. The loss of Alicia and her baby created a tremendous void in her family. Overcome with anger, grief, and a desire for justice, Sherry decided that Alicia's life should be remembered for more than its tragic end. She established the Purple Project, named after Alicia's favorite color. This initiative aims to support single mothers, the group Alicia was part of when she needed help. The project also offers grief counseling for parents who have lost a child. One of its key events, the Night of Hope, was held on the 12th anniversary of Alicia's death, alongside grief retreats and community initiatives designed to bring hope out of tragedy. Additionally, Sherry filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Home Depot and Grand Flower growers to hold them accountable for failing to address Alicia's repeated pleas for help. Ultimately, the companies were found responsible for the deaths of Alicia and her baby. This case serves as a harsh reminder that workplace harassment can have fatal consequences. While it's easy to advise someone to leave a toxic job, the reality is often much more complex. Alicia needed that job and its paycheck. Tragically, Brian Cooper exploited her vulnerability. Hopefully, Alicia's story will encourage others to speak up and compel organizations to take the protection of their employees more seriously. Tiffany James was born on August 18, 1980, in Tampa, Florida. She was the only child of Rosalind James and Turner Humphrey. Her parents were never married and separated soon after her birth. Her father moved away, started a new family, and showed little interest in her. Years later, as an adult, Tiffany decided to locate her father. They spoke, and she assured him that she held no grudges and wanted to keep in touch. This reunion allowed Tiffany to meet her half-siblings and their families, leading to the development of strong, positive relationships. Meanwhile, Rosalind focused on her own life and left Tiffany with her grandparents. Although Tiffany had both biological parents, she was primarily raised by her grandparents. Her mother Rosalind visited occasionally but did not play an active role in her upbringing. It was her aunts, Barbara and Vicky, along with her grandmother Beulah, who took on the parenting responsibilities. They ensured Tiffany attended preschool and school, celebrated her achievements, and supported her in every way. She was an outstanding student with a passion for literature and a creative spirit. She dreamed of opening her own beauty salon and becoming the best in her city. Tiffany was a sociable, popular, and stylish person. She often attracted attention with her looks and confidence, making her appealing to young men. While in high school, she started dating a boy named Derek Andrews, who was a year older. They both believed their love would last forever. In her senior year, Tiffany became pregnant and gave birth to their first child, a son named Derek, on July 26, 1998. This changed her plans for college as she dedicated herself to motherhood. Derek took on various odd jobs to support his family, while Tiffany's family helped them as much as they could. In August 2002, 4-year-old Derek became a big brother when his parents welcomed another son, Darian, named after his paternal grandfather. At this point, Tiffany and Derek were living together in a small rented apartment. Although money was tight, they remained hopeful for their future and dreamed of creating a stable life together. A couple of years later, however, their romantic feelings faded, and they decided to separate amicably. The son stayed with Tiffany while Derek supported them and made an effort to spend time with his children. He eventually began a new relationship but remained committed to being an involved father to Darian and Derek. As a single mother with 2 young sons, Tiffany started to seriously consider her future. She wanted a career that would allow her to provide for her family independently. Since she had not pursued further education after high school, she was eager to change that. Tiffany enrolled in a medical college, aiming to become a cosmetic specialist. Her ultimate goal was to open her own practice or even a clinic where she could turn her passion into a successful business. To manage her finances better, she moved back in with her grandparents, as paying for both tuition and rent was too much of a burden. Her family helped care for her sons whenever she was at work or in class. After finishing her education, she got a job at a private clinic as an assistant to a well-known doctor. She had a steady income and began advancing in her career. For a while, it appeared that everything was finally coming together for her. However, she found herself lacking a strong, supportive partner to lean on during difficult times. In early 2007, Tiffany met a man named Daryl Williams. He was 14 years older than she was and had 3 grown children from a previous marriage. Despite their age difference, this did not hinder their romantic relationship. She believed that he was a mature and trustworthy man, genuinely prepared for a serious commitment. Their relationship developed quickly, and soon, Tiffany, at 27, found herself pregnant. This news shocked both of them, but they were excited, and Daryl proposed to Tiffany, who happily accepted. However, during the routine checkup, she learned she was expecting twins. In March 2008, she welcomed twin girls, whom she named Diamond and Denia. This happy event has brought joy to her life, and she has devoted all her love to her family, cherishing every moment spent together. Tiffany enjoyed taking her children to different events, discovering new activities, and creating lasting memories. She also loved dressing her daughters in matching outfits that gave them a fashionable appearance. Her older sons participated in sports like baseball, track, and swimming, while her twins, Diamond and Denia, began dance classes and rhythmic gymnastics at an early age. As the years went by, the children grew, but Tiffany and Daryl never married. Gradually, their relationship began to deteriorate as they found it increasingly difficult to communicate. Tiffany eventually realized that Daryl was not the person she had thought he was. Their relationship ended when she discovered his infidelity. Without any hesitation, she gathered her children and departed. After separating from Daryl, Tiffany relocated with her family to the quiet town of Brandon, Florida. This community was known for its strong infrastructure, low crime rates, and affordable housing, making it an ideal place to raise a family and start over. Eager to create a stable future, Tiffany completed a hairstyling program and landed a job at one of the top salons in town. She quickly built a loyal clientele and gained a reputation for her talent and creativity. Aspiring to open her own salon one day, she began looking for potential rental locations. Her skills, ambition, and rising reputation established her as one of the most in-demand stylists in the area, paving the way for a bright career ahead. As a single mother of 4, she moved into a spacious rental apartment in a newly built residential complex situated in one of the town's finest neighborhoods. Nearby amenities included a school, a dance studio, and a large sports center, everything she needed for a comfortable and fulfilling life for her family. By 2012, her sons had become more independent and often helped care for their younger sisters. Around this time, Tiffany decided to reconnect with her father and half-siblings. She traveled to Alabama to find them, and their family bonds were restored. They began to stay in touch, visit each other for holidays, and their children quickly grew close. Life was falling into place. Her finances were stable, and she was surrounded by loved ones. Although she felt secure about her future, Tiffany, a young, ambitious, and attractive woman, yearned for romance. She still believed in love and hoped to find a man who would love her and embrace her family, a man with whom she could build a strong and happy home. In 2014, Tiffany started her own small business, which began to thrive. That same year, at 34 years old, she reconnected with Ben, a man she had known in her youth but hadn't seen in nearly 15 years. Their unexpected encounter at a shopping mall marked the start of something special. Initially, they kept their relationship private. Ben was also a single parent who had recently settled in Brandon with his 2 young children. They began as friends, sharing coffee and meaningful conversations. When Ben finally confessed his feelings for Tiffany, she felt like the happiest woman in the world and admitted she felt the same way. Their relationship grew deeper and both families supported it. Tiffany was ecstatic, savoring this newfound happiness without rushing. She kept their romance discreet, sharing details only with her closest friends and family and refraining from posting pictures of them together on social media. Gradually, she prepared for a significant change as they decided to move in together and create a home as one family. On October 1, 2015, Tiffany posted a romantic and mysterious message on her personal social media account. The post featured a photo of 2 hands clasped together, one male and one female, both adorned with wedding bands, set against the backdrop of a Bible. The caption simply read, "Yes." This suggested that she was engaged, but she chose to keep her fiancé's identity a secret for the time being. Tiffany and her family always put a lot of effort into celebrating Halloween. They planned their costumes ahead of time, carved pumpkins into glowing lanterns, and went out to collect candy from their neighbors. By this time, Darian and Derek were old enough to enjoy the holiday with their friends, while the younger twins, Diamond and Denia, still loved going trick-or-treating with their mom. Since they lived in a large apartment complex, going door to door wasn't this thrilling. Instead, they visited a nearby neighborhood filled with single-family homes, where Halloween decorations created a festive atmosphere. Families in costumes moved from house to house, and generous homeowners made sure to have plenty of candy, so no one went home empty-handed. That night was supposed to be fun and relaxing, but no one could have predicted the tragedy that was about to unfold. A local woman was home alone, preparing to watch a horror movie to get into the Halloween spirit. The streets outside were quiet, most families had already gone home, and she didn't expect any more trick-or-treaters. Around 9 p.m., she was dozing on the couch with the TV still on when suddenly there was a loud noise, like an explosion, that woke her up. At that moment, her front door, which she had forgotten to lock, swung open. Startled, she quickly got up to shut it. What she saw on her doorstep left her frozen. A figure dressed entirely in black, wearing a hockey mask like the ones from the Friday the 13th movies, stood there. Instead of a machete, the person was holding a shotgun. For a split second, it felt like a scene from a movie or an elaborate Halloween joke. In shock and unsure of her next move, she glanced down and saw a woman lying at the figure's feet, writhing in pain and struggling to move. The masked figure looked down at her for a moment before raising the weapon again. Terrified, the woman ran for her life. She slammed the door just as 2 more deafening gunshots rang out. Collapsing onto the floor, she covered her head with her hands, fearing she might be next. Then, silence. The stillness was broken by a faint tapping on the window. At first, she ignored it, too frightened to move. But when the tapping came again, she cautiously approached the window and, against her better judgment, looked outside. There stood a young girl, tears streaming down her face. Without thinking of her own safety, the woman rushed to the door to help. Outside, she noticed another young girl sitting on the ground, shocked, hugging her knees. Without hesitation, she brought both girls inside, locked the door, and grabbed her phone to call for emergency services. By that time, other neighbors had heard the chaos and called the authorities. When first responders arrived, they discovered a woman lying in a pool of blood on the pavement. Despite her critical injuries, she was still alive. Paramedics did everything they could, but unfortunately, on the way to the hospital, she died from her wounds. The victim had no identification, and the 2 young girls were too traumatized to speak. However, as more neighbors gathered, they quickly recognized the woman, Tiffany, who is the owner of a local hair salon, along with her twin daughters, Diamond and Denaya. Authorities immediately contacted Tiffany's relatives, while Diamond and Denaya were taken to the hospital for evaluation. Fortunately, neither child had suffered any physical injuries, but they were deeply traumatized. Mental health professionals were brought in to help them process the event. Many people had been out celebrating that night, and several witnesses recalled the horrifying scene. However, piecing together the full story was challenging, as many struggled to believe what they had seen. It all felt too surreal, almost like a staged performance. Meanwhile, the masked attacker slipped into the crowd of costumed revelers and disappeared without a trace. Neighbors reported seeing a silver Chevrolet sedan parked near the house shortly before the incident. Witnesses noted that the car sped off after the first loud noise but stopped a short distance away moments later. It was uncertain whether the driver fled in a panic or had a connection to the attack. Unfortunately, no one saw the license plate, and no one could identify the driver's gender. Adding to the difficulty, there were no security cameras in the area to capture the incident. Witnesses could not provide even a basic description of the suspect, who was fully covered in a costume, hood, hockey mask, and gloves. They only agreed that the attacker was slightly taller than average and had a muscular build. At the crime scene, Tiffany's handbag was found on the ground, with its strap torn and its contents strewn about. Initially, investigators considered the possibility of a robbery gone wrong, but this theory was quickly dismissed. The cash inside the purse was untouched, and Tiffany was still wearing several pieces of gold jewelry. Nothing had been stolen. Moreover, it seemed unlikely that such a violent act would occur over a simple mugging, especially with a shotgun involved. The aggression of the attack suggested that it was personal. But who would want to harm Tiffany, a cherished mother and respected community member? Investigators began by questioning her ex-partners and her current boyfriend. Tiffany had been separated from her former partners, Derek Andrews and Daryl Williams, for years, and any previous conflicts had long since dissipated. Her current partner, Ben, remained a mystery since Tiffany had kept their relationship private, revealing little to friends and family. Due to this secrecy, detectives felt it necessary to question him urgently. Officers arrived at Ben's house around 5 a.m. the next morning. Despite the early hour, all the lights in the house were on, and Ben was found sitting by the front door with a shotgun. The officers ordered him to drop the weapon and raise his hands, which he complied with, insisting he was not involved in the attack. He then pleaded with the officers to protect his children, explaining that he had learned about the crime just hours earlier and was fearful that the attacker might come after him next. He felt a strong need to protect his family. During the questioning, Ben shared that in the months prior to the incident, Tiffany had told him about someone she believed was stalking her. She suspected it might be her ex-fiancé, Daryl, who was also the father of her twin daughters, Diamond and Denia. Their separation had been difficult, and they were currently engaged in a custody battle over the girls. Ben confirmed his whereabouts on Halloween night with a strong alibi. He stated that he, Tiffany, and their children had gone trick-or-treating earlier that evening. Later, he took his children to visit relatives while Tiffany and the twins intended to return to their home briefly before staying the night at his place. However, she never showed up. Almost at midnight, Tiffany's oldest son called to deliver the devastating news. Once investigators verified Ben's alibi, they released him and allowed him to go home. The focus then shifted to Daryl. Was he involved in such a violent act? Detectives were skeptical. Could he really have committed something so horrific in front of his own daughters, leaving them with lifelong trauma? On November 1st, officers visited Daryl's last known address but found that he no longer lived there. Instead, they encountered his adult daughter, who informed them that her father had moved in with his new girlfriend 6 months ago. She was visibly shaken when she heard about Tiffany's tragic death and was clearly in shock. His daughter disclosed concerning information about his short temper and controlling behavior. He was known to be domineering and would become furious when things didn't go his way. Additionally, he had a strong interest in firearms and owned a shotgun. Daryl's daughter explained that her father's breakup with Tiffany had been very contentious. He harbored deep resentment over having to pay child support and had fought hard for full custody of their twins, even though he knew he had little chance of winning. However, she noted that if Tiffany were gone, he would have had a better chance of gaining custody of the girls. Her daughter described her father as ruthless and believed he was capable of committing a crime. After speaking with her, investigators went to Daryl's workplace, a large chemical plant. His supervisor spoke highly of him, describing him as a dedicated worker who could handle the workload of 2 people and was always willing to take on extra shifts. However, Daryl's aggressive demeanor often led to conflicts with co-workers, sometimes resulting in physical confrontations. Notably, on the night of November 1st, Daryl, for the first time, refused a last-minute shift change, citing personal reasons. This unusual behavior raised further suspicions, as it left him without a confirmed alibi for the night of the crime. Detectives visited the home of Daryl's new girlfriend, Rosalind. They noticed a silver Chevrolet sedan in the driveway that matched the description of a car seen near the crime scene. When Rosalind answered the door and saw the officers, she appeared nervous. However, after learning the reason for their visit, she insisted that Daryl had stayed with her all night and had not left the house. Since there was no physical evidence to hold Daryl, the investigators decided to interview the main witnesses, Daryl and Tiffany's daughters, Diamond and Denia. They were still struggling to cope with the trauma. Denia was mostly silent, experienced nightmares, and couldn't sleep without the lights on. Diamond seemed to handle things better but would break down in tears whenever the conversation shifted to that tragic night. To help them, a skilled psychologist was brought in to gently support the sisters through their trauma, and over time, they began to share their experiences. They revealed that while staying with their father, they often saw a mysterious man delivering folders of papers to him. One day, when their father stepped out, they couldn't resist their curiosity and peeked inside the folders, discovering photos of their home, pictures of their mother in various locations around town, and even images of Ben's house. This leads them to realize that their father has employed a private investigator to follow their mother, Tiffany. Even more concerning was the fact that just 2 days before Tiffany's death, she had won full custody of the twins in court, requiring Daryl to pay child support, a situation he strongly opposed. With this new evidence, the police obtained a warrant for Daryl's arrest. Given his known history with firearms and the likelihood that he might resist, the officers decided it would be safer to arrest him at work, where security was tight, minimizing the risk of an armed confrontation. When the officers arrived, Daryl appeared shocked but did not resist arrest. He calmly allowed them to handcuff him and requested to speak with a lawyer. Initially, both he and Rosalind denied any involvement in the crime. However, Investigators found phone records and GPS data showing they were both near the crime scene that night. Rosalind was the first to cooperate. In exchange for a lighter sentence, she agreed to testify against Daryl, stating that she had not known his exact intentions, she had merely driven him to the location and waited in the car. When she heard a loud noise, she panicked and drove off but slowed down to let Daryl jump in before fleeing. She claimed that she later provided him with an alibi out of fear for her own safety. Daryl faced charges of first-degree homicide, which could lead to the death penalty. In an attempt to escape this severe punishment, he tried to shift the blame. Upon learning that Rosalind had testified against him, he accused her of having an affair with his adult son and claimed that they had conspired to frame him. He was willing to implicate his own son in a serious crime to save himself. However, investigators quickly disproved his claims by thoroughly examining the evidence and confirming that his son had no involvement in the events of that night. With no alternatives available, Daryl eventually accepted a plea deal to avoid the death penalty. In April 2017, at the age of 49, he was found guilty and sentenced to 50 years in prison, with eligibility for parole after at least 25 years. Shannon Graves was born on November 4, 1988, in Ohio, USA. She was raised by her mother, a single mother. Everything changed when her mother met Ronnie DePaul, who became a father figure in her life. Ronnie treats her like his own daughter and she quickly takes a liking to him. She was known for her kind heart and loving nature. In 2016, Shannon proudly earned her cosmetology license, marking a new beginning after a challenging childhood. Her friends affectionately called her Star, recognizing her free spirit, honesty, and selflessness. However, Shannon's compassionate nature sometimes led her to make poor choices in relationships. Following her mother's death, she struggled with substance abuse. Her close friends observed that she often fell for the wrong men, whether due to bad luck or her attraction to rebellious personalities. Despite these challenges, Shannon was determined to take control of her life. Her professional achievements filled her with hope for a brighter future. Unfortunately, Shannon's intuition was wrong when she became involved with Arturo Novoa. He is of Puerto Rican descent, charming and passionate about music, but he is also very secretive about his life. This secrecy likely stemmed from his lengthy criminal history, which began in 2004 with arrests for assault and property damage. A few months later, he faced charges of escaping from prison and obstructing public service. In 2006, he was charged with felony fleeing after a police chase, followed by aggravated arson charges. After serving his prison term, he was arrested again for trespassing in 2008 after being evicted from his residence. In 2010, he faced additional charges related to weapons and unlawful entry. Court records indicate that he was a man addicted to criminal activity and made a living by illegal means. When Shannon and Arturo began dating in the summer of 2016, everything seemed to be going well. She introduced him to her family and started spending more time at his home. That same year, she got a puppy, which brought her joy and companionship. During the holiday season, she celebrated with her family, enjoying food, laughter, and gift exchanges. This gathering would unknowingly be the last time the family would be together. 2 months later, while with Arturo, Shannon briefly encountered her sister, Debbie DePaul. They discussed Debbie's upcoming birthday in March, for which Shannon was already making plans. However, when the day came, she did not attend, an unusual absence. Initially, her family thought she was just busy and would arrive later, but she never came. Alarmingly, she did not call or send a message, not even to wish Debbie a happy birthday. When she also missed the Easter gathering the following month, concern grew. As time passed, her family's anxiety increased. After calling and texting several times without receiving a response, Ronnie attempted to contact Arturo. He claimed that he and Shannon had broken up and that she had moved to Cleveland with someone else. However, when Ronnie and Debbie tried to contact her directly, they were unsuccessful. Determined to find her, they went to her apartment, but found no clues. Her car and phone were there, but her beloved dog was missing. Around this time, Arturo was arrested on charges related to banned substances. In the following weeks, Shannon's family was engulfed in fear and uncertainty. In June, Debbie officially reported her as a missing person to the police. In their report, family members acknowledged Shannon's past struggles with addiction but highlighted that she had never gone this long without contacting them. Authorities requested anyone with information to come forward while they searched hospitals and jails, but there was still no trace of Shannon. Investigators found tracking her whereabouts to be extremely challenging, especially since she had been missing for months. They filed a request for her phone records and began looking into her personal life, noting that she often spent long periods of time with her boyfriend, Arturo, before her disappearance. The police subsequently interviewed Arturo. He recounted the same story he had told Ronnie, adding complexity to the case. Without a clear timeline for Shannon's disappearance, they could not confirm Arturo's alibi. Additionally, there was no evidence of a new boyfriend with whom Shannon had supposedly moved in. As suspicions rose, detectives learned about an ex-boyfriend named John, and considering this lead, they decided to investigate him further. John, a business owner, had a criminal past involving trafficking of banned substances. His incarceration had led to his breakup with Shannon, as her friends remembered how distressed she was upon learning of his conviction. Complicating matters, John had been released from prison shortly before Shannon was reported missing. When police found and interviewed him, he claimed he hadn't seen her since February, when she mentioned getting back together with Arturo. His statement implied that her relationship with Arturo may not have been as perfect as it seemed. Still, John admitted that he had lingering feelings for her at the time of their last conversation. With two potential suspects but no clear evidence, police were having a hard time getting their case off the ground. When Shannon's phone records were finally released, investigators hoped to glean vital information. Unfortunately, these records only confirmed that she had gone to work as usual in late February before her phone was suddenly turned off. The number had since been reassigned to someone else, and around that same time, all activity on her credit cards also came to a halt. The investigators had no idea that the answer to the case was about to emerge, but in the most frightening way. On July 30th, a man from Youngstown called 911 to report a shocking discovery. He told the operator that he had found human remains inside black garbage bags, and most disturbingly, the head was missing. Upon receiving the signal, rescue workers notified the police, who quickly arrived at the home of the caller, Kenny Eschenbaugh, and his wife, Jill. While forensic experts investigated the remains, Kenny and Jill were brought in for questioning. According to their testimony, the freezer containing the body parts belonged to a friend. A week prior, this friend had asked Kenny and Jill to store it in their basement, claiming it was filled with meat he didn't want to spoil. On July 29th, Jill decided to cook spaghetti and meatballs for dinner and thought she could use some meat from the freezer, planning to replace it later. However, when she approached the freezer, she found it locked. Assuming their friend was just being eccentric, she used a screwdriver to pry it open. To her horror, instead of meat, she found bags filled with what turned out to be human remains. Feeling nauseated, she quickly shut the freezer and called for Kenny. Together, they cautiously opened one of the bags and discovered a human foot. Since Kenny and Jill's stories matched perfectly when questioned separately, they were quickly ruled out as suspects. Investigators then turned their attention to the friend who had left the freezer in their home, named Anthony Gonzalez. Kenny explained that he had met Anthony 4 years earlier through a mutual friend, bonding over their shared interest in music. Although they hung out occasionally, Kenny found Anthony to be unpredictable and sometimes aggressive. Despite being cooperative, the identity of the victim remained a mystery until forensic experts discovered a scorpion tattoo on one of the feet, matching a tattoo belonging to Shannon, a woman who had recently disappeared. While more tests were planned, it increasingly appeared that the remains belonged to her. This left investigators with a concerning question: how and when was Shannon placed in the freezer? Shortly afterward, the lead prosecutor in Ohio held a press conference to discuss this chilling case, which was rapidly becoming one of the most disturbing in recent history. Although the medical examiner couldn't determine the cause of death without the victim's head, Shannon was positively identified through fingerprint analysis. Her family was heartbroken to learn the truth about their beloved daughter, discovering that her fate was far worse than they had ever imagined. Shannon's family and friends gathered in a local park for a candlelight vigil to remember her. Debbie, one of the attendees, told reporters that she believed Shannon has found peace. The vigil was intended to celebrate Shannon's life rather than to focus on sadness. Many people lit candles and released lanterns while wearing shirts with messages honoring Shannon. However, Shannon's family was visibly pained. Ronnie, too devastated to appear on camera, shared his indescribable grief, explaining that he loved Shannon as a daughter and sought justice for her. In the meantime, investigators ramped up the search for Anthony. They soon discovered that Anthony Gonzalez was just an alias. His real name matched the identity of someone they had already suspected, Arturo Novoa. Authorities learned that Arturo had been dating a woman named Katrina Layton, who moved into his house shortly after Shannon was last seen. Given Arturo's lengthy criminal history, the police acted quickly, arresting both him and Katrina and searching their home. The police found red stains on the walls, a knife, and a manual for the freezer where Shannon's remains were located. Kenny, who previously believed his friend's name was Anthony, was shocked to learn Arturo's true identity. He wasn't the only one confused. Arturo often used different names, possibly to conceal his past involving activities related to banned substances. During questioning, Arturo remained composed, repeatedly denying any connection to Shannon's death and claiming ignorance about her whereabouts. He also distanced himself from the freezer. Katrina supported his claims, but their story began to unravel when police discovered a key among her belongings that fit the freezer's lock, linking them to the crime and ensuring they remained in custody. As the investigation continued, Shannon's ex-boyfriend John played a crucial role in uncovering additional information. He spoke to Shannon's friends and learned about a bonfire attended by Arturo. A witness reported that Arturo used the fire to burn personal items and, when questioned, he claimed they were Shannon's clothes, which he burned as revenge for alleged infidelity. That night, he was with his friend Andrew Herman, and they both continued to burn clothing. Investigators later searched the bonfire site and found remnants, including a bracelet that belonged to Shannon. As the investigation progressed, authorities contacted a woman named Jamie, who knew Andrew and his wife, Michelle Eilenfeld. Jamie reveals that Arturo and Katrina were behind Shannon's murder, while Andrew helped handling the body of her body. Jamie stated that Katrina had harbored jealousy towards Shannon for a long time, and that Shannon felt the same way about her. The situation became more complicated when neighbors reported seeing Katrina walking Shannon's dog and using her credit card to make small purchases, suggesting that Katrina had taken over a part of her life. Amid these incidents, Ronnie passed away unexpectedly without witnessing justice. Debbie, overwhelmed with sorrow, sought therapy while caring for her younger brother and Shannon's cherished dog. Meanwhile, Andrew and Michelle were placed in pretrial detention. Authorities gathered a wealth of evidence that Michelle had threatened witnesses, interfered with the investigation, and covered up the crime. As the case went to the jury, the truth of what happened became clearer. On February 24, 2017, Arturo killed Shannon, likely with Katrina present. He later called Andrew to assist him in handling the body. They disposed of her head, stored other body parts in their freezer, and discarded some remains in an undisclosed location that authorities have yet to find. The prosecutor stated that Arturo was merely a small-time dealer of banned substances, acting out of jealousy over Shannon's finances. Katrina, on the other hand, wanted Shannon to keep her distance so she could pursue a relationship with Arturo. Facing the death penalty, the four defendants ultimately accepted plea deals. Arturo Novoa received a life sentence for murdering Shannon. Katrina Layton was sentenced to 18 years, Andrew Herman to 12 years, and Michelle Eilenfeld to 2 years. Arturo attempted to appeal his sentence, but it was upheld. To keep the memory of Shannon alive, Debbie created a social media page dedicated to her younger sister, where she frequently shares pictures of her pet dog. She frequently visits Shannon's grave, where she has established a special ritual. After cutting the grass, Debbie spray paints a large pink heart next to the headstone, which was Shannon's favorite color. In a local interview a few years later, Debbie recalled the devastating call she received about the partial discovery of Shannon's remains. Currently, the investigators who helped convict Arturo are still searching for the missing parts of Shannon's remains. Debbie remains hopeful that they will be found someday as she continues to honor her sister's memory through her dedicated online tribute. A year spent in the open air can ruin many things, but what if a person's body was in this condition? Was the person an accidental victim of circumstance, or was he brutally murdered? And how can the criminal be found if the detectives only have an incomplete skeleton at their disposal? Yellow House Canyon is a vast natural area of rugged terrain located near the town of Lubbock, Texas, USA. This area used to be Indian territory, but in 1993, it gained a different kind of fame. During that summer, 2 local residents went hunting in the game-rich canyon. However, at the very beginning of their trip, something suspicious caught their attention. They came across a bone, completely devoid of flesh. From several meters away, it did not appear to be part of an animal. As they got closer, they realized it was a human skull and reported it to law enforcement. That same day, forensic experts arrived in the canyon. In addition to the skull, other items were found nearby, scraps of clothing and a woman's shoe. The remains were scattered. To piece everything together and find the missing parts, investigators sifted the soil around the area. This process allowed them to find several more fragments of the body and smaller bones, as well as some strands of hair. Unfortunately, the skeleton was far from complete. It was likely that predatory animals had dragged the bones around the area. Despite the efforts of law enforcement officers, they were unable to recover all the parts. All of this evidence was taken to the lab for examination. The scant fragments of human remains, according to the forensic expert, had been exposed to the elements for at least a year. To obtain more information, the assistance of a forensic anthropologist was needed. Among the remains, the lower part of the spine, the sacrum, was found. This discovery allowed the experts to determine that the remains belonged to a woman. The shape of the skull helped establish that the deceased was a person of European descent. The cranial sutures had not yet closed, indicating the approximate age of the deceased, which the specialist estimated to be a young woman between 18 and 24 years old. More intriguing were the marks found on some bones. These were notches and depressions of a pointed shape, characteristic of injuries inflicted by a knife. The marks suggested that the girl had died as a result of murder. One cut was located in the shoulder blade area, with 6 cuts in the vertebrae region. In total, forensic scientists counted about 12 to 30 separate injuries. There were likely more, but this could only be confirmed after all the bones were found. Thanks to all this data, a diagram of the victim was created, which depicted the skeleton of the deceased with all her injuries noted. According to the forensic expert, the criminal had attacked from behind. Such injuries could not have been inflicted by the victim herself, leaving no room for doubt. The unknown girl was considered a victim of murder. The notches on the bones indicated that the attack had been very brutal, reflecting a furious assault on this young girl. More information was needed to identify who the victim was and to initiate a full investigation. During the time that the remains had been in the canyon, several disappearances had occurred. It became necessary to turn to the public in the hope of obtaining tips regarding the deceased, after which the search for the perpetrator began. A press conference was held, prompting calls to the city police department. Meanwhile, dental records were checked, and data was compared with records of 64 girls who had disappeared across the United States over the past years, but none matched the description. They then decided to enlist forensic expert and artist Karen Taylor, the only one capable of attempting to recreate the face of the deceased from the skull. Such specialists are usually called upon last, as there is a high probability of error and inaccuracy in the resulting image. Many factors can introduce distortion, but there was no alternative. Karen Taylor was contacted because she had developed a unique method known as two-dimensional facial reconstruction. Unlike other methods, which often strayed into the realm of art and the artist's interpretation, this method relied on scientific data. Karen took into account the structural features of each race, making her approach more accurate than others. Using rubber markers, she measured the thickness of the facial tissues by placing them directly on the skull of the deceased. This method ensured a highly accurate reconstruction based on the thickness indicated by the markers. She established starting points for creating the facial image. This detailed process required many hours of concentrated effort. After positioning the markers, she took numerous photographs from various angles and placed translucent paper over the bones to help outline the approximate facial contours. Next, Karen identified common facial features based on her anatomical knowledge, including that the average human eyeball measures about 25 millimeters in diameter. However, there is limited information available for facial reconstruction since soft tissues like the ears and nose completely decompose. The deceased had only a few tiny skin fragments around her nose, so the minimal information relied on the state of her bones. Karen observed a slight asymmetry at the base of the nasal opening, suggesting a possible injury from the victim's past. Fortunately, during a search in the canyon, a lock of hair was discovered, helping the forensic artist identify the exact color. The deceased had fair hair with a yellow-red tint, providing a useful clue. Given the statistics on eye colors associated with this hair type, Karen chose a likely eye color for the victim. After creating a rough sketch, it was quickly released to the media and shared across Texas. Unfortunately, there was a significant margin of error, so they depended heavily on the artist's skill. Investigators hoped that Karen's depiction would help someone recognize the missing person. A year had passed since the girl went missing, and details about her disappearance might have faded from people's memories. She wasn't listed as missing, possibly because she had no family or friends to report her absence. It would be an understatement to say there was little hope. Now that the police had published a photo of the supposed victim, they could only wait and hope for a positive outcome. A few days went by, and it was an ordinary morning for Beverly Tillery. While browsing through the newspaper before heading to work, she came across a photo of an unknown young woman whose remains had been discovered in Yellowhouse Canyon. Beverly noticed that the woman's features closely resembled those of her 17-year-old daughter, Belinda Tillery, who had gone missing over a year ago. Concerned, Beverly reported the similarity to the police. Dental records were checked, confirming that the remains belonged to Belinda. At the time of her disappearance, Belinda had been working as a dancer at a local nightclub run by people involved in organized crime and a biker gang. Beverly had always disapproved of her daughter working at that club, especially since she was only 17. However, Belinda was a rebellious teenager. She had dropped out of school and often ignored advice from others. The club offered good pay, making it hard for her to turn down the opportunity. Without an education, she felt she wouldn't be able to earn that kind of money anywhere else. Upon discovering the name of the bar where the victim had worked, the detectives quickly went to investigate. They doubted anyone at the bar would be willing to talk. The bartender, upon seeing a photo of the girl, stated that the club would not cooperate. The detectives felt that the staff were withholding information. Everyone insisted they didn't know anyone named Belinda, as if no dancers by that name had worked there. Ultimately, the detectives left without any leads. However, Belinda's family insisted that she had danced there, even the night before she disappeared. When Belinda worked at the club, her older brother typically drove her to work and picked her up whenever he could. On that fateful night, he drove her home after his shift but didn't notice anything unusual. According to him, the last time he spoke with Belinda, she mentioned feeling unwell, so she went to her room to sleep after arriving home. He had consumed a few drinks that evening and swiftly went to bed, passing out and not hearing anything. The next morning, he intended to check on his sister, but he found no one in her room. No one had noticed when she left. The belongings she always took with her were gone. Belinda had departed with her purse, driver's license, and all her essentials. Initially, no one was concerned, assuming she was with friends. However, as time passed and she did not return, the situation became increasingly alarming. Her mother was the most worried. She knew the reason behind her daughter's illness. Belinda had often felt unwell during the previous month, and a few weeks before her disappearance, her family had taken her to the doctor. It turned out that she was pregnant. When they went to the police with a missing persons report, the local authorities reluctantly began the search, but they eventually stopped altogether. It was decided that Belinda had simply run away to start a better life far from her hometown. However, Her relatives did not believe this, despite the fact that Belinda had previously disobeyed and led a rather dissolute lifestyle. The news of her pregnancy had changed her significantly. She did not consider having an abortion or running away. Instead, she decided it was time to change her life for the better to become a good mother. The shocking news prompted the young dancer to leave the club, return to school to finish her studies, obtain a certificate, and find a decent job. During this time, Belinda seriously began to discuss further education and a career. She took the matter much more seriously now. She reluctantly talked about who could be the child's father. However, according to her mother, it could only be one person, Troy Armstrong, who always seemed suspicious to her. Her relatives did not approve of her communicating with him. His mother was especially against it, particularly because he was a member of the same gang that owned the club. Additionally, Troy was 10 years older than Belinda, yet he still couldn't seem to settle down. Beverly knew that he was notorious for numerous petty crimes, which resulted in him frequently ending up in prison for short stints. During the intervals between his criminal activities, he lived with friends or in his car. Troy struggled with banned substance addiction and was known for his quick temper. Beverly was convinced that he was capable of much more violent acts than robbery and fighting. From the very beginning, the Delray family did not like him very much, but Beverly did not want to ruin her relationship with Belinda by criticizing him. She simply accepted her daughter's choice and hoped that Belinda would come to her senses. No one suspected that things could escalate to the point of pregnancy. Beverly believed that this young man could never become a normal father for the child, and he would likely be opposed to the pregnancy. There was no one to suspect of the murder except Troy. As soon as the detectives learned about him, they planned to raid his home. But tracking him down was not easy. Troy was essentially homeless, living wherever he could, though many people knew about him. Thanks to local residents, it was discovered that Troy had not lived in the city for at least several months. As far as his friends knew, the main suspect had headed toward Roswell, New Mexico. The search for him there took 2 whole days, but it was unsuccessful. However, during this time, the police managed to contact his former lover. She turned out to be Angela Allen. She herself had not seen Troy or Belinda for quite some time. Angela reluctantly cooperated with the investigation, describing her relationship with Troy as toxic. She truly loved him, and he claimed to feel the same, but the longer they were together, the more violent and unstable he became. It escalated to the point where he physically abused her on several occasions. Angela was well aware of Belinda's situation, which seemed quite suspicious. She first learned about Belinda when a stranger called her boyfriend, "She is Belinda." Belinda could not get through, but left a message on the answering machine stating she was pregnant and that Troy wanted to talk about it. Shortly before Troy and Angela had disappeared, they had run into Belinda at a local bar where she worked. Troy insisted that Belinda should have an abortion, as he was not prepared to be a father. This led to a serious conflict between them. According to Angela, Belinda refused to terminate her pregnancy, stating that she was determined to raise the child on her own without outside help. She didn't care who the father was or how he would treat the child. This infuriated Troy, but he managed to restrain himself and did not start a fight. After these events, Angela decided to take advantage of the situation and end her relationship with him. Despite their breakup, she still maintained some of her ex-boyfriend's belongings, thinking that he might return for them. She feared that throwing them away might anger Troy. Eventually, she turned everything over to the police. Among these items was a large knife. When this bladed weapon was handed over to the forensic experts who were working with the remains, there was an immediate assumption that it could have been the murder weapon. The appropriate analyses were carried out, but the results were disappointing. The knife could have been the murder weapon, but the tests were highly inaccurate. The longer the bones were exposed to the open air, the more the remaining damage was subject to deformation and erosion due to the elements. A year later, it was impossible to say with 100% certainty whether this object was the murder weapon. The detectives who spoke with Angela had the feeling that she was not telling them everything. The investigators decided to speak with her again, and they were correct. In fact, they had to meet with her 3 times. Each time, Angela provided a little more information, often under pressure and through subterfuge. During the third meeting, she explained why she was being evasive. She simply feared for her life and insisted that cooperating with the police could anger Troy, leading him to seek revenge. Nevertheless, she managed to reveal increasingly valuable information. The main suspect, Troy, was still missing, and the detectives were desperate for leads. Angela mentioned that she had kept in touch with him after their breakup, and that shortly before Belinda disappeared, she had met him again. Troy had said he was going to invite a dancer from the club to camp in the canyon, where the body was later found. On his way back from the canyon, he stopped by Angela's to pick up some things. She immediately noticed that he was acting suspiciously. There was blood on his hands and a fairly large wound. When asked about it, he claimed that he accidentally cut himself while camping. However, Angela no longer believed him. She asked several leading questions, but Troy avoided direct answers. Despite this, it became obvious that something alarming had happened. Shortly after, Belinda really did disappear. Yet, Angela still could not believe that Belinda had become a murder victim. Based on the description, it seemed Troy had killed her with a knife. As often happens, the attacker himself had been injured. When the detectives finally informed Angela that Belinda's body had been found in that very canyon, she had no doubts. Troy had killed the pregnant woman that night after all. Angela was horrified to realize what a dangerous man she had gotten involved with in the past. Even worse was the fact that the killer was still at large, and no one knew where to find him. Sufficient circumstantial evidence had accumulated against him, leading the police to issue an arrest warrant for 27-year-old Troy Armstrong. Angela was interviewed again, hoping she hadn't left out any crucial information that could help find the suspect. But now, she insisted that she had told the police everything she knew. She had no idea where her ex-boyfriend was, but she mentioned his best friend, who worked for a transportation company in California. Angela offered to help by having them talk to this man. The detectives believed her, as it was evident that she wanted the criminal to be apprehended quickly. She said she could not feel safe as long as he was free, especially considering that it was thanks to her that the police had received a substantial amount of circumstantial evidence. After this visit, detectives contacted the transportation company where Troy's friend worked. Fortunately, the management was aware of his whereabouts. The man worked as a truck driver, and each of the company's trucks was equipped with a tracking system, allowing them to pinpoint his location quite accurately. Suspecting that he might be helping Troy evade capture, the transport company management cooperated with the authorities to track the truck driver in real time. During the search, he was moving through Nebraska. To intercept the vehicle, they notified the highway patrol along his route, setting up a checkpoint. Within 3 hours, Troy's friend was stopped. It was believed that he might have dropped off Troy somewhere along the way. However, to the detectives' great surprise, Troy was found in the sleeper compartment of the truck. There was no concrete evidence that the driver had helped him hide from the police, and he denied any wrongdoing. Nonetheless, the main objective was to capture Troy, who was immediately arrested and charged with first-degree murder before being extradited to Texas. The accused insisted that he had no involvement in Belinda's death. Following his arrest in New Mexico, police searched his personal belongings and found a suspicious key, which turned out to belong to a storage unit he had rented in Mexico. When the police located and opened the equipment, they discovered several personal items belonging to Belinda, some of which were identified by her family. Troy was never able to convincingly explain why he kept these items or how he had obtained them, which only added to the circumstantial evidence against him. Among the items found in the storage room were a driver's license and accessories that Belinda loved and always carried in her bag. They should have been with her after she left work at the nightclub. Troy probably hid all of these to make it more difficult to identify the body if it were found. According to prosecutors, Troy had a grudge against Belinda because she refused to get rid of the baby. After she revealed her pregnancy, his girlfriend Angela decided to break up with him, which drove him into a rage. One night in July 1992, when Belinda saw her family for the last time, Troy borrowed camping gear from a friend. Later that night, after the rest of the Tillery family had fallen asleep, he showed up and invited her to go camping in Yellow House Canyon. He claimed that he had broken up with Angela, wanted to discuss the pregnancy and their future relationship. It is clear that he managed to deceive the naive underage girl who was carrying his child. Not suspecting that it was a trap, she went on this short trip, hoping that they would have a complete family. During the hearing, the jury was presented with the version of events in which Troy and Belinda were left alone in the mountains. Instead of discussing their life together, Troy again insisted on terminating the pregnancy, which Belinda refused. They quarreled. In a fit of rage, he took a knife and attacked her. She tried to escape but was stabbed more than 10 times in the back, after which she fell to the ground. Belinda was likely still alive when Troy left her to die from blood loss. Upon learning that her ex-boyfriend had finally been arrested and would face punishment, Angela agreed to testify against him in court. Her testimony proved to be pivotal. Angela became bolder and confessed that during their next meeting, Troy admitted to stabbing Belinda in the mountains and leaving her there. Angela had remained silent until then because she feared that if she reported it to the police, she would become his next victim. As she did not know the approximate location of the body, Angela was afraid the authorities wouldn't find it before Troy could take revenge. The trial lasted 4 days, after which the jury took only 2 hours to find Troy Armstrong guilty of first-degree murder. The jury believed that he deserved a much harsher sentence than was legally permissible. In fact, his actions had essentially sentenced 2 individuals, a woman and her unborn child. Unfortunately, at that time, the state did not have a law making the murder of a fetus a crime. The judge decided to sentence the criminal to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. In December 1996, he was incarcerated. In 1997, his lawyer filed an appeal, but it was rejected by the court. Troy Armstrong was reportedly serving his sentence at the Gatesville Correctional Facility in Texas. During this time, the law changed, offering him a chance at release. In 2021, he became eligible for parole. However, the commission decided to keep him behind bars, where he remains to this day. In October 1975, the murder of 15-year-old Martha Elizabeth Moxley shocked the town of Greenwich, Connecticut. Her body was found brutally beaten with a golf club, which was traced back to the home of a well-known family with political ties. This tragic event caused years of anguish for the Moxley family as they sought justice for their daughter's death. Let's go back in time. The Moxley family moved to Greenwich, Connecticut, hoping to find a safe environment for their children, John and Martha. Their parents allowed them to explore the town freely, trusting in their safety. Martha was a remarkable teenager known for her beauty and intelligence. She had a vibrant personality and a close bond with her brother. Throughout her childhood, Martha showed impressive intellect. Her love for reading and writing reflected her passion for knowledge. Martha was well liked by her peers because of her outstanding qualities. Her lively and friendly nature helped her make many friends. She often found herself at the center of social gatherings. After the Moxley family moved to their new home in Greenwich, Martha continued to excel in school. Her commitment to her studies showed through her excellent grades and achievements. She had a natural gift for critical thinking and problem solving, distinguishing her from her classmates. Martha's aspirations went beyond academics. She wanted to impact the world through her writing. Her love for storytelling and her talent for expressing ideas clearly made her a strong candidate for a journalism career. October 30th was recognized as Mischief Night in Greenwich. During this tradition, children and teens engaged in playful mischief, often causing minor disturbances in their neighborhoods. The night typically involved activities like vandalism, property damage, and pranks. Eager to join in the fun, Martha Moxley spent the evening playing toilet papering over houses with her friends. It was a joyful night filled with laughter and innocent entertainment among the teenagers. Among the partygoers was 17-year-old Thomas Skakel, the nephew of Ethel Kennedy, who is the widow of former U.S. Senator Robert F. Kennedy. The Kennedy family was one of the most powerful and well-known political families in the United States from the 1960s to the early 1990s. Their name became closely associated with American politics, impacting all areas of society. President John F. Kennedy was viewed as a symbol of youthful energy and change, captivating the nation with his charisma. His administration made important advances in space exploration, civil rights, and foreign policy. After John's assassination, Robert F. Kennedy took on the role of leader for the family's political ambitions, known for his commitment to social justice and strong support for the civil rights movement. Robert's assassination added to the sorrow of the already mourning Kennedy family. However, their involvement in various scandals and controversies has damaged their reputation and overshadowed their political legacy. Sources indicate that Martha Moxley and Thomas Skakel were flirting and even kissing on the night she disappeared. The last sighting of Martha was around 9:30 p.m. when she was with Thomas near the pool in his backyard. After that, no one knew where she was until a shocking discovery was made the next morning, which stunned the entire community. On October 31st, the day after Mischief Night, Martha Moxley's body was discovered under a tree in her yard. Her clothing and underwear were pulled down to her ankles, but the medical examiner found no signs of abuse assault. Nearby, pieces of a 6-iron golf club were located, which became a key piece of evidence in understanding the circumstances surrounding Martha's death. The chief medical examiner of Connecticut performed an autopsy on Martha. His findings revealed disturbing details. Martha had multiple scalp lacerations, skull fractures, and injuries to her brain. The absence of signs of a struggle led the medical examiner to determine that Martha had been violently assaulted. The medical examiner determined that the weapon that caused her injuries and death was a 6-iron golf club, which matched evidence collected at the scene. The severity of her injuries and the strong evidence linking the golf club to the murder confirmed that her death was neither an accident nor an end to her own life. They classified Martha's death as a homicide. Witnesses reported seeing Martha with Thomas Skakel on the night she died, raising suspicions and directing detectives' focus towards the Skakel family. An investigation later found that the golf club used to kill Martha originated from the Skakel home, which further increased doubts about the involvement of the two Skakel brothers. Although the investigation made initial progress, it soon stalled due to interference from the Skakel family. They interfered with the investigation right from the beginning. One significant way they obstructed progress was by blocking the police from accessing their son's school medical records. These records could have shed light on Thomas Skakel's behavior and any health issues he might have had at the time of the crime. By denying investigators this information, the Skakel family hindered the exploration of potential motives. Thomas's father took further actions to impede the investigation. He discouraged witnesses from stepping forward or sharing what they knew about the crime, making it challenging for investigators to gather first-hand testimonies. This interference also significantly hampered the progress of the investigation. When news of Martha's murder emerged, Thomas and Michael Skakel, grandsons of Robert F. Kennedy, became targets of intense media scrutiny. Reporters and the public were eager to uncover any potential involvement or connections to Martha's death. As members of the Kennedy family, the brothers faced overwhelming speculation. Throughout the investigation, Thomas and Michael maintained their innocence, asserting that they had no involvement in Martha's murder. They consistently denied being at the party where she was killed and claimed ignorance about the circumstances of her death. Their repeated denials attracted even more media attention and public interest in the case. However, despite the extensive coverage, there was no solid evidence linking the brothers to Martha's murder. The murder of Martha Moxley attracted worldwide attention because of the involvement of the Kennedy family. Initially, attention turned to Kenneth Littleton, who was hired as a tutor by the Skakel family just hours before Martha's murder. Littleton was a live-in tutor for the Skakel brothers, and since he was present near the crime scene, he was suspected of being an accomplice. His interactions with the brothers were examined, and some believed he might have influenced them to commit the crime. As time passed, the testimonies from Thomas and Michael Skakel about that night began to change. Witnesses reported that Michael had confessed to killing Martha with a golf club. Additionally, a former classmate of Michael claimed he received preferential treatment and boasted about escaping punishment for the murder because of his ties to the Kennedy family. Many books have been written about the Moxley murder in an effort to uncover the truth about her death. One notable book is A Season in Purgatory by acclaimed author Dominic Dunn, which focuses on the Moxley murder case. Dunn conducted thorough research to provide a detailed account of the events leading up to Martha's death. Another significant book, Murder in Greenwich by Mark Furman, a former police detective known, presents his perspective on the investigation and various theories surrounding the case. These books examine different theories proposed by investigators and advocates for justice for Martha. Despite significant media and public interest, the case remained unsolved, which caused frustration for both investigators and the public. The tragic death of Martha Moxley shocked the community and led to a lengthy investigation that lasted nearly 2 decades. In 1998, a jury was assembled to examine the circumstances of her murder. After a thorough inquiry lasting almost 2 years, there was enough evidence to charge Michael Skakel with the crime. In January 2000, police issued an arrest warrant for Michael, who then turned himself in. He was soon released on bail after posting a $500,000 bond. On March 14, 2000, Michael was arraigned in juvenile court. Although he was 15 years old when Martha was murdered, the judge decided to try him as an adult. Michael Skakel's trial began on May 7, 2002, in Norwalk, Connecticut. Prosecutors built a strong case by presenting evidence linking him to the crime and highlighting inconsistencies in his alibi. The defense maintained that Michael was innocent, arguing he was at a cousin's house when the murder occurred. The murder trial of Martha Moxley received extensive media coverage, drawing attention from both national outlets and the local community. Many people were invested in the case, hoping for justice for the victim. During the trial, the prosecution introduced a book proposal that suggested his involvement in the crime. In this proposal, Michael admitted to engaging in inappropriate behavior while in a tree on the night of the murder. Although he acknowledged being at the crime scene, he did not confess to directly harming Martha. Ultimately, on June 7, 2002, Michael Skakel was convicted of Moxley's murder and sentenced to 20 years to life in prison. He was assigned to Garner Correctional Facility in Newtown, Connecticut. Reactions to the verdict were mixed, with some individuals feeling satisfied and others raising concerns. Michael Skakel appealed his conviction, presenting several arguments. One of his main points was that the trial should have occurred in juvenile court instead of superior court, as he was only 15 years old at the time of the crime. He contended that his age should have prevented him from being charged as an adult. Furthermore, Skakel claimed that the prosecution committed misconduct by not disclosing crucial evidence that could have exonerated him, which he argued violated his due process rights and compromised the fairness of his trial. Nevertheless, in January 2006, the Connecticut Supreme Court dismissed his claims and upheld his conviction. In 2007, Michael Skakel hired a new attorney and requested a retrial in Connecticut court, proposing a new theory regarding Martha Moxley's murder. His defense team presented evidence implying that Gitano Tony Bryant, cousin of Los Angeles Lakers player Kobe Bryant and former classmate of Michael at Brunswick Private School in Greenwich. In an August 2003 videotaped interview with Vito Colucci, a private investigator hired by Michael, Bryant said that on the night of Moxley's murder, one of his friends had tried to molest her. Bryant said he had not come forward because his mother had warned him that, as a black man, he would be framed for the unsolved murder. A 2-week hearing in April 2007 allowed this oral evidence to be presented, along with other matters. In September 2007, Michael's attorneys filed a motion, based in part on Bryant's complaints, for a new trial. Official prosecutors responded that Bryant may have made up the story to sell a drama about the case. During this period, Michael's defense team appointed several full-time investigators to examine case details, hoping to uncover new evidence that would prove his innocence. Unfortunately, their efforts were hindered when a Supreme Court judge rejected Michael's request for a new trial, stating that Bryant's testimony lacked credibility and that there was no evidence of misconduct by the prosecutors during Michael's initial trial. Michael's attorneys once again appealed this ruling to the Connecticut Supreme Court. In 2009, a panel of 5 judges listened to the appeal, but a year later, on April 12, 2010, they ruled 4-1 against Michael. Despite these challenges, Michael and his legal team remained determined to secure his freedom. In January 2012, they requested a sentence reduction, arguing that he had been an exemplary prisoner and warranted leniency. However, this request was denied, and Michael's sentence continued to stand. In 2013, Michael Skakel appealed his conviction, claiming that his trial attorney, Michael Sherman, had not provided effective representation. During the hearing, Michael Skakel accused Sherman of lacking interest in his defense and being more focused on collecting fees to resolve his financial issues. This raised serious doubts about the fairness of his trial and the potential for a wrongful conviction. As a result, Michael was granted a new trial after it was determined that Sherman had not adequately defended him during his 2002 trial. On November 21, 2013, Michael Skakel was released on $1.2 million bail with other conditions. He must be monitored with a GPS device, have no contact with the Moxley family, must be checked in periodically by phone, and will not be allowed to leave the state of Connecticut unless permission is granted, although he later moved to Westchester County, New York. In December 2016, the Connecticut Supreme Court reinstated Michael's murder conviction in a 4-3 majority decision, writing that his conviction was the result of overwhelming evidence presented by prosecutors and that his legal representation was adequate. In January 2018, prosecutors asked the Connecticut Supreme Court to revoke Michael's bail and return him to prison to continue serving his sentence. However, on May 4, the Connecticut Supreme Court vacated Skakel's conviction and ordered a new trial. The court ruled that Sherman had provided ineffective assistance when he failed to contact an alibi witness named by Michael and that Michael had therefore been deprived of a fair trial. State prosecutors in Stamford have the right to seek a new trial for Michael. This ruling surprised many in the legal community and rekindled questions about the true circumstances of the crime. Despite the possibility of a new trial, in October 2020, the chief state attorney informed the Supreme Court that they would not retry Michael Skakel for Martha's murder. This decision came after a thorough review of the evidence. This decision marked the end of a lengthy legal battle that spanned decades and left many unanswered questions about the murder of Martha Moxley. In 2023, Michael Skakel filed lawsuits against the police investigator in Greenwich. The lawsuits alleged malicious prosecution and violations of constitutional rights. According to Michael's attorney, the fact that Michael spent over 11 years in prison for a crime he did not commit meant he could never be compensated for that lost time. Michael's lawsuits claimed that the lead investigator did not perform their duties properly, acted unethically, and intimidated witnesses during interviews, alleged that the investigator threatened witnesses to make them give false statements. These accusations raised significant concerns about the integrity of the investigation and the validity of Michael Skakel's conviction. Furthermore, the lawsuits argued that the investigator sought to profit from Michael's case, indicating that they were working on a book and film about Michael's supposed involvement in Martha's murder while continuing the investigation. Martha's brother, John, was shocked by the news of Michael's freedom and struggles to grasp the reasoning behind the court's decision. He is convinced that Michael Skakel is guilty and insists that just because Michael is free, it doesn't mean he is innocent. Instead, it reflects the judge's decisions and legal technicalities. In John's view, Michael Skakel killed his sister, a belief he holds firmly. Even though Michael is no longer in prison, John believes he will always be mentally imprisoned, tormented by his actions for the rest of his life. The Oxygen created a powerful documentary exploring the details of Martha Moxley's murder. The Moxley family chose to be part of the documentary to honor Martha and promote the truth about her case. Over the years, many theories have emerged regarding Martha Moxley's death. One of the key suspects is Michael Skakel. Several motives have been suggested for his alleged involvement, including jealousy and anger. Martha had a close friendship with Michael's brother, Thomas Skakel, which might have fueled Michael's resentment towards her. It has also been speculated that Michael may have seen a meeting between Martha and Thomas that triggered feelings of insecurity. Another suspect is Thomas Skakel himself. One theory proposes that he may have killed Martha out of jealousy or rage, especially since she reportedly rejected his advances. Additionally, their family tutor, Kenneth Littleton, has been considered a possible suspect. Others believe that her murderer was simply someone who happened to be passing by. Proponents of these theories argue that Michael Skakel was an easy target and that the true murderer has not yet been caught.